They're recording. Lovely. All right, it is 6:04 PM. Call to order the May 21st, 2024 meeting of the Manchester-Essex Regional School District School Committee. We're now in open session. We'll begin with public comment. Public comment guidelines can be found in section BEDH and BEDH-E of the policy manual. Does anyone in person like to make public comment? Would anyone online like to make public comment tonight? If so, please unmute yourself and let us know. Okay, hearing none, we will close public comment. Chairman's report. It's been kind of quiet today, but then I thought back and realized the last time we met was right before the Essex Town meeting. So I guess there's something to report there. We had the town meeting. Thank you to all who stayed through that. Much appreciation. As you all know, the budget did pass. I looked to see if the minutes are up yet from town meeting. They're not ready yet, but my understanding that there were maybe 2 or 3 no votes and the rest was a resounding yes on the budget, and the feasibility study was unanimous. So that is a success. We did have a question come up at Essex Town meeting about the vote we took on our budget, which we will address later in the continued business section. So we've got that taken care of for tonight. My time has mostly been spent answering questions about the feasibility study. As you know, voting is taking place today in Manchester as we speak. So we might even know something by the time our meeting's over, who knows? And also responding to a request for info for a Gloucester Daily Times article. Pam was able to give all the information necessary, and I was asked for a quote. And that's really it for my chairman's report tonight, because we have a packed agenda, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Student report. I don't see Diego. I do see Scylla. Would you like to give a report or just say hello?
I came to watch, and I was going to say I can do it if you want to, but I'm impartial. Isn't that
sure? Jump in. You're on the screen. Yeah.
I didn't write anything, but I brainstormed some ideas. So it's not totally on the spot.
Got it.
Honestly, there's not a whole ton to talk about, so I just wanted to talk about like kind of some of the goings on about the school right now, what's being talked about a lot. So the first thing, I mean, kind of obviously 4 presentations were going on today, so like this whole room, I actually wasn't able to join, I wasn't able to go see, which I was really upset about, but this whole room was like full of seniors presenting their projects, and I think one of the things that I've noticed is as a result of the maybe strictening of some of the regulations about what is and isn't a SCORE project, there's a lot more people doing like internships at companies or at like businesses or things like that. So I've seen a lot more people like actually doing full internships, which I think is kind of good to see. Second is I've been hearing a lot of talk about the school service dog Daisy, who I just met today, and despite my allergies have been already interacting with. So that's very exciting. I also think it's really cool that I've heard that came out of a 9th grade civics project, because I think it's really awesome to like for students, especially some of like the younger like 9th graders, to see the tangible kind of results of their efforts. I think that's really inspiring. So beyond just having a very cute dog, that's also very cool to see. Third was that I think the other thing that everyone's just talking about is preparing for finals week, what the schedule's going to look like. Kind of, I know, I don't know if this is a conscious thing, but I think a lot of teachers have been shifting more towards like projects instead of like long testing finals, which I think is working better for a lot of students. I can't say that I'm partaking a whole ton in finals week this year because most of my classes were APs, so I'm done with most of them. Another thing that I wanted to talk about that's, I guess, not so much on a positive note was something that I hear a lot talked about more so in like junior, senior classes. I've written a couple articles about it for the school paper, and we're running another article about it this June issue. Is that there has like a lot of people have been noticing maybe like a marked decrease in student involvement in extracurricular activities among the freshman and sophomore classes. I don't know if that's a result of them possibly being in middle school during COVID or anything like that, but it really is becoming an issue that a lot of clubs and stuff are really having a lot of trouble recruiting members, because it's all juniors and seniors, with the exception of some awesome freshmen and sophomores. I'm not saying we don't have them. It's just across the board, it is a problem in athletics and clubs and other extracurricular activities. So it's just, it's unfortunate, because it makes me and other upperclassmen kind of worried about what happens to the fate of those clubs and activities after we graduate and if they're still going to be existing. So that, I guess, is something that we're maybe trying to work on for the fall, is twisting people's arms more than we already do to join activities. Or how do we motivate, how do we inspire the younger grades to really get involved with all the kind of awesome things that our school has to offer. So that was the only other thing that I wanted to mention, because it is something that we talk about a lot as juniors and seniors. But yeah.
There was a particular set of clubs for that are
Um,
hitting harder than others, or
so we can talk about the ones that I participate in or that I've witnessed firsthand, but definitely in debate, we've been having issues in for a couple of years. Journalism, we've just started having issues with, which we haven't had issues with before. Science team has one sophomore, I believe, and then the rest of us are juniors and seniors. HOSA is also quite upperclassmen heavy, and then I also know certain sports like cross country have had some difficulty recruiting in the younger years. But those are just, honestly, those are just the ones that I'm part of, but I also hear a lot of other people talking about it with other activities as well.
Can you say a couple words about how, what does the recruitment, or how do you try to get underclassmen involved?
So I would say one of the big things that we do to get people involved is we do this huge club fair in the fall. It's run by peer mentors, and they've done an awesome job with it the past couple of years. And basically, like, all the clubs and activities will set up a stand, and students on their way to lunch will come through and they can sign up for activities that they want to participate in. And then theoretically, they're like added to a classroom or sent an email about when that club meets, how to get involved in it. But I also know that, like, oftentimes maybe the people running the clubs will come out with like a huge list of people who signed up, and then like 3 weeks later, it's like 1%. So there's been issues both recruiting, but also more so retaining people.
Yeah.
Is an issue.
so not having a high schooler myself, how do clubs work on their schedule? Do they take place during the day? Do they take place after school? Do they conflict with one another? Do they conflict with sports? How does that all work out?
So it really depends on the club and the commitment that that club is. So certain activities are definitely a higher like time commitment than others. There are clubs that meet both after school. There are a couple clubs that meet during U block, but we're trying to get them all to meet after school because that's a conflict with band and chorus kids who have class during block. I would say for the most part, they meet after school, usually right after school. But then there's also clubs like I run debate, and we do a lot of work outside of when we're actually meeting for tournaments and
And
stuff.
then if you're playing sports, does practice start right after school, or does practice start, would you do a club and then do practice?
So it also depends on the sport. There's certain sports that start like every single day at 2:45, and then there's certain ones that the practice time shifts. So I mean, I've played sports that fall into those categories, and I've been, for the most part, able to like maintain my commitment to different clubs as long as I'm staying. So like the people who are running them, I'm not going to be here on a Tuesday next day. But I would say it's definitely doable to be a part of certain clubs and also be on a sports team.
Maybe part of the question is why.
We've been theorizing. I think it probably has something to do with the fact that they were in middle school during COVID. Food for thought. So yeah,
Good conversations supposed to be better.
yeah.
Excellent. Anyone else have questions for Stella tonight? Well, thank you. Thank you for jumping right in. Good luck with that. All right, moving on to the consent agenda for tonight. Our consent agenda includes acceptance. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda, which includes warrants, the payroll for May 9th, 2024, and the AP vouchers 1068 through 1073. Also, the minutes from our last meeting, May 6, 2024, and the revised minutes from the April 24th, 2024 meeting based on the comments made at the last meeting. Is there a motion?
I need to make a motion to separate the minutes and the warrants because I need to abstain from the minutes, meeting that I was not present for.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, so let's separate. Let's start with, all right, how about we do the minutes each separately and we'll do the warrants all together. So entertain a motion to accept consent agenda for warrants for payroll 5/9/24 and AP vouchers 1068 through 1073. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
A second? Say, you gotta say it out loud. John, any discussion? I had one question, actually, on the refrigeration, American Refrigeration Company for the Memorial Rooftop Unit and refrigerator. Is there a warranty
Yes,
to cover that, or?
meeting about that tomorrow.
Got it. Like to know it.
I'm on it, yes.
I figured you would be. Nice to ask it. Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, let's start with the May 6th meeting. Entertain a motion to accept the May 6th, 2024 minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Anna, is there a second?
Second.
Jake seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Okay.
So that's 5 with 1 abstention. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, entertain a motion to approve the revised minutes from the April 24th, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's Jake. Is there a second?
Second.
John seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous with 1 abstention. You weren't there either? Okay, so that's 4 in favor. That still passes. Thank you very much. Subcommittee reports. Facilities. That's us. We have not met as a facilities subcommittee, but there's a very important vote taking place right now that we hope to have an update on tonight. Is there anything else we need to report out on for this at this point? We're in the same place as we were. Correct. Yeah.
Is this a good time to ask questions about the feasibility study?
Um,
Or the
I have
facility?
it in my update, so.
yeah, we'll put it in the update. Great. All right, finance subcommittee. We also met. Anna, would you like to report out?
Sure. So we went through a few laundry list, if you will, or parking lot list. Things that potentially we could, Michelle's gonna look into whether it's gonna be short term or long term. For example, to formalize and document the complete budget process. Not only the school committee calendar that we have, but also to maybe create a more comprehensive, like administration and more comprehensive calendar with a specific steps. And that way it's more transparent and it's also more clear to everybody what is involved behind the scene. We talk about maybe improve the budget book presentation. Michelle did mention that you and Pam already started making some changes this year around, and there we are going to make some other changes. We, meaning you guys, will probably make some other changes going forward to make it more user friendly and many other things. We also talk about the finance policy for auditors' recommendations. Michelle, you mentioned you're going to talk to the auditor to get more insights about exactly what they're recommending. That's about a long-term financial plan to align with the strategic plan and also the district improvement plan. And so that way is more helpful for everybody to see the in and outs, not just on the programmatic side, but also how it impacts the budget. We'll talk about a more consistent routine reporting because up to, I think, a year or two ago, we didn't have any internal reports. But last year we had 3. Michelle agrees that we should have at least 4 every quarter. But you're hopeful that you have one time for the first Q1 and Q2, and then thereafter, you're hoping to have a monthly budget to action report. But we're gonna reassess your commitment and the workload later this year. I think we talk about the finance team structure or the business unit structure as you are reviewing collecting the data the first 90 days. Maybe also to look at the structure, if that's enough for you, not enough, especially now there's a questions about there's a questions about the administrative expenses. So it might be a good time to look at that all together. We discussed about the auditor, if there's a need to, change the auditor. And so I think we discussed that, you're gonna propose maybe a time for us to, bring it to the full school committee to report discussion, and that might be fall 2024. Yeah. That's it.
And I think the only thing, two things I would add was that was the time when Pam, I believe you reported out the answer to how we're going to address the budget vote moving forward, which we'll address tonight. And then I just want to point out that we did actually have internal budget to actual reporting prior to that. It just was on a different schedule. We had one at the end of the year. I think we had one usually November,
Just
like November, December.
going
the-
into tentative and then
Right.
June to close out.
And then we started with a more regular schedule of 3 per year.
I forgot to add, we also discussed about the October 1st annual report per the regional agreement. I think we discussed that there was no formal template or the reporting template, if you will. So you guys will discuss it with the stakeholders to decide what people would like to see, and then we'll formalize it. Yes. Did I miss anything?
Any questions?
Regarding the auditor, why the need to change? Is it just because you want a different opinion? Or are there issues with the existing auditors we use?
It just, I don't know if you want to discuss it now.
I'll answer, I think, just to bring where we're actually with it. We didn't discuss whether or not to change. What we discussed was that it had come up in the meeting where our auditor was here, because I've received that question a number of times from multiple people. So the question that we discussed was, what is the process and timing for this committee to have a discussion of whether we wish to change? So that wouldn't be a decision that was made within a subcommittee. So the timing for that, given the contract that we're under with them, it was determined that potentially having that discussion in the fall for the following year's contract, because they're already getting started now on the next round.
And I
Would
raised
be
it,
when we discussed it.
and I raised it because it's best practice to, because we have to have our auditor for 15 months. So I raised it to be discussed.
Right, but again, we're not going to go directionally, but we'll have that discussion in the fall so that we can all decide the pros, go through the pros and cons and make a decision. Thank you. Good report. Negotiations.
Happy to report that Unit B ratified the contract, so we are moving forward with that. We will take our public vote on that later tonight. I think this is a great thing. I think that our TAs deserve this contract, and I think that it's fair and serves all sides in a intelligence. I'm excited about it.
Very exciting. We'll blow on you for a minute when we actually get to that vote. Policy.
I'll wait until then.
Yes, policy and program. Who is reporting out on this? Let's start with the unenrolled student access to middle school athletics and activities. And do you know who's planning to report on this? All right, so just for the people, and by the way, I neglected to welcome all of our students here tonight. It is that time of year where for civic action, you need to come attend a meeting. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
I thought we were just popular.
We're just- Obviously.
With the students.
So just for anyone paying attention, to bring everyone up to speed, we received a request by email December 1st. It was sent out to the committee with our packet materials for the December 19th meeting with a request from a parent who was hoping we would consider a policy specifically to have a determination made on a case-by-case basis about whether students who live in our 2-member towns but do not enroll in MERSD and are not under the umbrella of MERSD responsibility through homeschool, for instance, as an example, private school students, that if they do not have access to a particular sport and that sport is offered through the district and it is not governed by MIAA specific criteria and rules, that be considered on a case-by-case basis and that we create a policy for such. So that was given to the Policy and Program Subcommittee for discussion and deliberation and to come with recommendations. They reported out, I think maybe the end of March, might have been one of the not too distant meetings, and we decided we needed a broader conversation. So please.
So, yeah, so this is following up on that request. We started by talking about the particular request and wanted to approach it from the perspective of trying to get to yes, if at all possible. Recognizing, however, that once a precedent is set in one context or one case, you kind of set a precedent for everything. So the case by case notion, when you come to policy, doesn't really work from that perspective. But we also broaden from sports to extracurriculars, because once you open it up to sports, then potentially the request could be made for any extracurricular. We talked a lot about pros and cons, and I'll review those in just a moment. And we gave particular attention to administrator perspective, because they have to actually manage this. And so we had input from AD Molinari, middle school principal Mano, and superintendent Bowden. So in terms of pros, the biggest pros were goodwill from and engagement with families in the community who help fund our district but don't directly participate, and the potential of increasing peer networks for students. The cons, from a straight sports perspective, this only applies to middle school sports. As Teresa noted, as soon as you get into the MIA, they're dictate that they have to be enrolled in the school. So this only applies to middle school. And right now, our middle school teams are all pushing their enrollment limits. The particular request, just to give an example, was for field hockey. We currently had 46 students this past season on 2 different teams, which meant that there was already 2 full team rotations on each team. And so adding additional members just compounds that challenge. So we're already at capacity of what coaches can manage and where we can provide a good experience for our in-district athletes. And if we have too many, we might have to consider a selection or cutting policy. And that goes against our philosophy of middle school inclusion for sports. More broadly, looking beyond sports, in any context, the administrators had concern about how to hold non-district students accountable for a district code of conduct when much of that is about being here in school. There's a potential impact on budget, a potential displacement of district students, and a potential increase in liability. Recognizing that's a lot of potentials, right? Recognizing that there's a lot of unknowns there that if we went down that road, we'd have to figure out. And we just don't have a lot of clear answers on, but definite awareness and concerns about. We also could not find an example of a district that has a similar policy. And we can't say that it was totally comprehensive looking across the state, but it was purposefully done, and we should have generated something if there was an easily accessible. So on balance, at this time, we are recommending that we maintain our current practice. We don't have a current policy about this, and that by maintaining the current practice, we do not move forward with a new policy for this. Pam has also noted this is consistent with past school committee conversations and situations that may have arisen, of which none of us were particularly involved in. And so we're happy to take questions or have a short discussion about this, but we would like a vote in support of this approach, just so we know we're all behind it.
So a vote to take no action.
A vote to take no action
Okay, so
or no change, right?
then in that case, since we work by way of motion, how about clarifying questions before deliberation? I have some clarifying questions. How was it addressed that within the original request, it was noted that this is something that has happened in the past, though, that we have had middle school students in just, I think, 4 years ago, participating in that very sport. So we don't do it except when we do. So did you guys discuss that at all?
That wasn't our understanding.
That was in the original letter.
4 years ago in 2020.
I
I believe it was several years prior to that, and that is what sparked the last round of this discussion, that someone enrolled without, they didn't get caught, but someone from outside school had enrolled, and they started practicing.
So that it would happen in an unknown way.
And well, we weren't on top of monitoring registration. The person registered, came to practice.
Yeah.
And then once discovered, we went through a series of discussions similar to this about the fact that the student wasn't registered here and not eligible to attend. That's the one that I'm knowledgeable. If there's some, I'm not going to pretend that
Yeah.
somebody else didn't sign up and participate
Right.
without my knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. So then
We would be going back rather far.
yeah,
So
go ahead.
The letter that we received says that the player is now a junior and that she played when she was in 8th grade. She played for Manchester-Essex, so that would have been 3 years ago.
Yeah. 3 years, not 4.
If I could have a name, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it's in the, or actually, I don't think the name is, but we can get that. So I guess the clarifying question for this is, was that discussed or approached?
It was, that particular instance was not discussed. I don't think it would influence
Yeah.
the broader conversation of pros and cons of that.
Okay, so okay, I think I have a point on that I'll wait till discussion for. And then again,
I have another, I think it's a clarifying question. Not sure what's discussion and what's
the
clarifying.
clarifying question is obtaining information and will then use, but it doesn't involve directionality.
Did you consider what standards would be used on a case-by-case basis to decide whether a middle school player could join a varsity team? Or did you consider a more general approach?
We considered a more general approach because it's hard to imagine a policy that says that we will apply the policy only in certain cases. Right, so we pretty quickly said, this is not a case by case issue. This is a policy for all potentials.
I think we might be in discussion territory because I think that we're gonna, yeah, we might want to discuss that further. Okay. Any other clarifying questions? Go ahead, Erica.
No, I'm on the subcommittee, so yeah, I'm not gonna ask a clarifying question. I thought we were moving to discussion.
So no further clarifying questions, then we can have a motion.
Then I will make a motion to vote in support of taking no additional action at this time.
Is there a second? Anna seconds that. Now discussion. Okay. Erica, you can start and then I'm gonna go with you.
I'm in the minority on this subcommittee, so I'm just going to express my view that the administrators absolutely shared very real concerns why this would be hard to administer. However, in reflecting upon this further, the thing that I keep coming back to is there some built-in guardrails. That being that this would only apply to middle school students who attend a local private high school, so we can actually identify them, within our geographic region, Shore, Brookwood, Gus, and the prep, that don't have that particular extracurricular offered to them. That is a pretty significant guardrail, the more I thought about it, and we actually, even as a subcommittee, haven't discussed this because it was just coming to me as I looked at it further. As I started to do my own research and look at these private schools, I mean, they're private schools, they receive tuition, and one benefit they get for that tuition is they have a lot of extracurriculars.
Yeah.
So it is the rare case, it's definitely the exception that something is not offered at a private school that we are able to offer here. Not to say we don't have great extracurriculars, we do, but private schools often mimic that and then add some more. So the letter we received and the request for consideration involves an instance, so it certainly, there is a potential that it'll happen, but many of the administrative challenges by this policy, I think, would be addressed by virtue of the fact that we are not talking about many students. And I know you can't say that for certain, but that was just my overview of looking at the other schools. And for me, the goodwill and kind of the diversity interest in involving our students that are in a small school system with other peers. One final thought is that it would still be subject to the limitation. If there is no space on a sports team, there would be no space on the sports team. I don't think an out of just or a non-district student can replace a district student certainly. But if there is excess capacity under these, with those guardrails in place, I would be comfortable with policy.
So do you
that's-
mean that only if the school that they are attending, the private school they are attending do not offer it, not because they got cut? Only if they don't, so field hockey, for example, the school offered it, but they got cut. But so they want to come here, and that is not allowed.
You're raising an issue I hadn't even thought about the cut scenario, but I think the way it was framed is I think this was only a request in the instance that the private school does not in fact offer the extracurricular that we have. So that wouldn't apply to the cut scenario.
Okay. So my thought on this is, my discussion points on this would be, number one, the idea of, so this was a really specific request, and I know it's hard to separate the one individual, student that sparked this request from the broader thing, but that's what we have to do, and you elaborated on that nicely. So within that, I would say, though, it is still pretty specific that if we consider such a thing, to expand it to clubs and all extracurriculars, I'm not sure that's the wisest move for us in this conversation, because sports has a defined oversight process and figurehead. We have someone actually identifying there are actual real numbers of capacity versus clubs where you could have, there's no real number of capacity. If the teacher's willing, they could take them forever. So I feel like sports is a pretty good test run for such a thing, because you can, within this, it was very spelled out with those guardrails, and we can amend that. We can set the guardrails to what we want them to be. So my question, so that I can understand this, is right now, our district policy is silent on this. The athletic handbook does say that you have to be a student of the district to participate in sports. How often is the handbook reviewed and updated, and who approves that? Because I guess what I'm getting to is, if we're silent on this policy and it's a question that's coming up, and again, I'm inclined to believe that this did happen separately from a weird situation, there may be times in the future where participation is very low and we want to spark it. So how do we, to my mind, a policy is something that gets us to who makes that decision and how. So this is, should a student be interested? The athletic director will determine the capacity. If there's more interest in capacity, there's a lot of that sort of thing. But in the absence of all of this, who makes this determination? Is it the AD? Is it the principal, or?
Well, I would say we make the decision in this case. That's why it came to us. Right? I mean, because this is talking about community relations, right?
Well, we don't make the no, we don't make the decision about the student. We make the decision about
The policy.
whether or not it's allowable.
Right.
And then
That's what
someone
you're-
else will decide how to implement
Isn't
that.
that what you're asking them?
I'm asking, since this isn't the case right now, it just says in the athletic handbook, no. Who decides
All I
that?
can offer, and I'll let you
Yeah.
guys continue conversation, is it's silent because the practice is students must be enrolled in school to participate in school activities. That's why it's silent. There's specific Maya language because it's blocking recruiting.
Mhm.
If you want to begin to implement policy that goes in a different direction, I think you heard from Tammy, you heard from Joanne, who would be managing the day-to-day. I think they were pretty clear on some of the concerns and obstacles would be, but the committee can certainly go in a different direction. I support their position.
So I understand their concerns. I also don't see any reason why their concerns would not be considered on a case-by-case basis. I think this particular example has fallen flat because field hockey was so over-enrolled already. But at the same time, we have our student reps sitting here saying we have low participation in activities, including some sports. Our students pay a fee to participate in sports. I'm assuming that outside students would also be paying a fee, possibly even a larger fee than students who are already enrolled in our school. I guess, and I haven't looked as deeply into it as you. I don't understand why each of the parameters that you outline wouldn't also have a or if, right? So the sport might be full, but if there's space, we have restrictions about student involvement that are related to our code of conduct. So then you get kicked off the team. I don't understand why none of these are, I don't understand why any of these are insurmountable.
I think what was discussed and what makes sense to me, of the concerns that the administration and the principals that have was, it's not just because it takes time and amount of effort and a lot of guardrails to manage all these what ifs and the one-offs. Because let's say if the enrollment is low in, say, baseball, my son's in baseball, and then like the other people want to attend, but field hockey is already capped. Then it's not equitable in a way that it's not like that, it's not all the same to all the sports.
Right.
Like if the
It's a
guardrail,
case by case basis.
but then what if the guardrail is not specific enough, that there is a loophole? So for example, just using that example, if the private school doesn't offer baseball, which is not possible, but if it doesn't offer baseball in that specific season, but our season offers, and then does that mean that they should attend? They can participate? But I think what the administrator and the athletic department is saying, it is too much effort to maintain all this without making it absolutely equitable.
I'm not sure I agree that equity is
So
part of the conversation.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
no, go ahead.
So say, I would use school choice as an example. As a public school.
Yeah.
We are not allowed to screen applicants or determine value on a case by case basis.
Right.
We are essentially beginning down a road where we would be evaluating individual students for participation in individual sports. And while we want to say private schools only, any resident student attending any type of school other than, you couldn't limit it to just the 5 private schools named. Right.
No, but wouldn't it be residents of our 2 towns
Who are not enrolled in
Or
our school.
who are not enrolled in our schools
That's it.
and want to participate in a sport that is not offered at whatever school they are enrolled at, or maybe they're.
Or at the town level. Or that was part of this as well,
Right.
or at the recreational level. So I
So-
I just
so
want to
let-
clarify
let me-
that.
let me
But
respond-
all
let me-
students are
let me
held to
respond
the
to
same
Katie's question for a second.
behavioral standards. And we're not allowed to screen school choice students, but we certainly are allowed to kick them off of a sports team if they don't adhere to the standards expected of an athlete on that team.
When
just
they're,
wanted to
when
clarify,
they're
I want your answer.
enrolled here and adhering to our school-based guidelines. So
But that could be, wouldn't that be a stipulation of joining the team?
I think the principal spoke to the fact that there's a different culture, there's a different set of expectations. We have no way of knowing what the students, whether they're on time, whether they're present that day. It does extend their scope of work to now monitoring other sites. I don't know how many students are going to present, and I know we'd like to keep it to athletics. I don't know if we can keep it to athletics once we set the precedent. I think if there is one point of agreement, case by case basis is not acceptable.
And that's what I need to clarify, because I want to get to Jake's thing. I think we're saying case by case basis to mean 2 separate things, because there's the idea, what I think I'm hearing is people considering case by case basis, meaning student by student. I'm reading case by case basis, meaning a season of a sport to a season of a sport. This fall field hockey team has 4 spots that we could manage having additional students without needing additional staff and without it impacting, budgetarily, case by case that way. Jake, I know you wanted to respond.
So I guess I'm reinforcing that. This is not just, we could write a policy that, has all the guardrails we want. It's 10 pages. It's got all the ifs, ands, and buts and conditions or whatever, right? However, this is almost more of a philosophy issue than a logistical issue. Right? This is to speak to Pam's point, this is a question of whether or not we are opening it up to anybody for any extracurricular, right? That's essential. By putting quote unquote guardrails, all these conditions, you're then starting to make it A, hard to manage and administer, and B, inequitable. And it's both of those things. The inequitable part is the philosophy piece of it, and in a sense, a legal part of it. But then the administration and workload of the administrators to manage it is the other.
What is inequitable about saying you may join a sport that has space? And you may not join a sport that doesn't have space?
I mean, I can,
Hold on, no, Erica's been raising her hand.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jen.
well, for instance, private schools are on,
Sorry.
And I called on Erica.
Okay.
go ahead.
Sorry. I guess hearing this discussion has brought up a positive side of this, and I can just say as a parent of athletes, there are absolutely years where it would be really helpful if we had additional students interested in playing. And I don't want to minimize, because I sat through these conversations with our administrators. I do understand that there are additional challenges. I also believe in my heart, we're not going to suddenly see a huge influx, and I know nobody can guarantee that. But when I looked at the list, like I said, the prep has 300 sports and activities. We are not going to get a ton of kids that couldn't find their activity at their private school. And that gives me some assurance that we would not be asking our administrators to take on, because I realize that they are overworked and have a lot on their plate already. So asking them to go beyond what they're already doing for our students is a lot, but I think it really could benefit everyone. And I'd like to think the effort would not be insurmountable.
Thank you. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, but like private schools are on different academic calendars than public schools are. They have different vacation weeks, they get out at different times. So if, let's say, if you have a player showing up to practice late every day because, let's say, a practice happens right after school, they're exempt now, and can they just show up 15 minutes late to practice? Or if they have a different April, spring break, and they go away for their family for a week,
This is
because it
But
doesn't matter.
it could be any, except high school sports, it could be any extracurricular.
And
except high school.
I don't anticipate a boatload of children all of a sudden coming here to try to play middle school sports, but I just think this is gonna open a can of worms.
Yeah.
And, there are trade-offs. You go to private school for various reasons, and you go to public school for various reasons. And so it's unfortunate that, you can't have it every way. So I agree with Jake on this. I think it's just gonna open up, perverse consequences, and that's my take on it.
It's fair. I think that we have a ton of kids who take vacation whenever they want, regardless of when.
I see that.
in middle school, certainly.
Just for consideration as you deliberate. We're talking about private schools. We also have to consider school choice out students in the scope of what private schools manage. So it may not just be that we're competing with St. John's or Shul or Brooks. There are schools that may not have access to these types of activities where it would benefit students to be here, where we might have an increased responsibility for supporting students to participate.
All Saints Academy in Beverly, do they even have any teams? I don't know, but it's a parochial school, right? So it's an example.
We'll take one more round of final points if anyone would like to make one. I will begin. I hear this. I also, when you say this is a philosophical thing, going through our policy manual and focusing on some of the language of non-discrimination in particular, which again is a separate thing and a legal thing, I know, but I think philosophically we're aligned with doing good in our communities and trying to make an inclusive space. I am not in support of the motion to take no action. I'm in support of continuing to consider this further and have further conversation about it rather than shutting the door. Not because I think we should do that thing, but because I think we should codify in policy when this thing comes up, who makes the decision and how, that this question is left to the athletic director and the middle school principal to make, they can say no. But I think that we should codify that because there may be times, sounds like there may have been very recent times, and there may be times in the future when it would be to the middle school's interest to have additional students participating. And I would like to leave that door open for those administrators to make the decision at that moment.
I'm going to implore the committee that if you're going to make a decision to allow this to go forward, and it's your purview to do so, that it's done with a generalized policy, and I'm in charge of coming up with process and protocol. You cannot put the director of athletics and the principal on a head-by-head decision or sport by sport. It puts them in a horrible position. There needs to be some localized procedure that we need to follow.
That's
It
fair.
may be 10 pages in the end.
I've heard even today of other districts that do have this, so I guess I'm just not convinced that I personally am ready to support closing the door.
We're happy to reach out to those.
Yes, again, this is information that came today,
Yeah.
so, but that's just where I stand. Anyone else like to make final comments? Sure.
But that's what exactly what we're saying is at this moment, we are not recommending it. Doesn't mean that we're shutting the door. We're not going to revisit again later on. But
Okay.
at this moment, we are recommending not to have a policy to allow it.
Well, it
That's
means
what
we
I'm saying.
stop taking action on this. It means we put it away until a time at which we decide.
But we could recommend a policy that says it is not allowed, period.
You could do that as
Right.
well.
Yeah, but we're not.
We're not
We're not
recommending that.
saying-
I understand, yeah.
So I'll just say that this is not an easy decision, right? I think everybody's intent is to try to be inclusive, to
Yeah.
try to make it work. On balance, the cons and the challenges administrators raised were substantively in my opinion, outweighed the benefits. And, for example, just the work it would take to verify that a school didn't have the sport that they're trying to enroll in. Somebody's got to make that call or verify that some way, right? That's time. And that's just one detail out of many that would need to be worked out. So, we have other very substantive policy work that needs to be done. And if you put this on us, this is going to take significant work to work out all these details. And other policies are not going to get done because of it
And just,
Well,
and just to
let's
emphasize,
not,
eventually.
let's not threaten.
and just to emphasize that the people that are in this, day in, day out, the athletic department, the principals are advising against it. So
We hear you,
keep in mind.
kept in mind. All right, discussion is closed. The motion on the table is to take no further action on this policy request at this time. All in favor of taking no further action? All opposed? That's 3-3. Chris is not here. Yes. So we can redo the conversation on the fourth. Take another vote.
We should have taken the straw poll
Yeah,
before we
right.
had all this conversation.
I was ready to be there. All right, thank you. So that's one. Thank you for your work on this. Just the fact that we don't all end up agreeing doesn't mean that it's not valuable
We have
process
a
to work.
district that's being referenced as who's actively doing that.
Beverly, one most recently. I didn't follow into it, and this was this afternoon, so that's the question. But maybe we could, if you guys could send a list to the committee of the school districts you did look into, so that,
And
no,
I canvassed his superintendent's listserv and only got responses that it's just a well-known practice that only students enrolled in your school participate in activities. And I believe I talked to Beverly, but I'm going to double back on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because that, again, that's secondhand information.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right,
And I
and
think we also canvassed the posted policy minutes.
yeah, I did a as thorough search I could as MASC policy manuals. That doesn't mean I know how to search it well enough to find it, but
due diligence has been done. Thank you. Okay, and then it says general update.
We can provide a general, part of the general update is to give everybody an update about the reserve policy. We have come a long way. We have actually looked into many different schools and districts about their current reserve policy, and how they define the reserves. We talked to, there's like several rounds of this. And right now this is sent to everybody, right? A draft reserve policy is to propose to have, to clearly define the definition of reserves. In this case is only the END and also, and only the stabilization. No other pools, like it's a school choice, facilities, all these different things are not part of the reserve. It's only this two. And the recommendation is to have this two total to be around the balance of 8% of this annual budget and capital budget.
Before we get into that, so because we just received this today and and it's not an actual agenda item, I don't want us to really get into the details of this in the competition pros and cons. So do you want to just let us know at this point, what directional information do you need from us? Like, I know it was sort of captured in a few bullets. And then we can review this on our own. But if there's some directional information you need from us, like one of the bullets was, should there be a minimum named?
Yeah, that's what we're getting at. The directional is, a key thing is the 8% is how tough do people feel about the 8%? Some districts have reserve policy only specifically about END. And END by state law is 5%. But some districts actually have lower than 5%, like 4%, like Hamilton, and some even 3.5 to 4%, or 5%. So we recommend that to not limit the END to the reserve policy to only talk about the END, but talk about the overall reserve, which is END and stabilization, and to have an 8% total. Now, so it's something for you guys to think about. Do we want to limit ourselves to the 8%? The second thing for you to think about is, I think we put in the language that if it's over 8% or over END of the 5%, we will need to put it into the operating budget the following year.
So we're not expected to vote on this tonight.
No, this is just FYI.
First read.
Yeah.
And,
This is not a first read, right? This is getting input.
okay.
Yeah.
And so now this is a public document and people who, since it wasn't on the agenda, people who might like to review it after the meeting will be able to access this and review it and attend public comment at a future meeting.
Yep.
Okay, great.
We're raising the issues that we need your input on.
Thank you.
It's-
Okay, so just with what you've covered so far, there are two issues here is, well, there are actually a whole bunch. Do we want to create a minimum? And if we do, what should the minimum be? So I guess I need information from you guys about, I can't comment on any of this because I don't really understand what you've done in the background to bring it up. So for instance, the things I would want to understand about that are statutory requirements, like are really clear. What is the statutory requirement from us? And where does this differ and why are we proposing this differ? Because we're not discussing this here, you're coming with a recommendation. And where does it align and differ from those? Some of the language in here is kind of, whose circumstances are extraordinary and that sort of thing. So I feel like, what is the helpful information that you need from us tonight? I don't think we can discuss 8% or any given number, but what would you like us to be thinking on to give you some directionality for moving forward?
I think that
I actually do have a question. I have directionality about the 80%.
Okay.
I'd just like to know how you arrived at the 80% and what comps and towns and versus districts and that sort of thing. And I'm not asking you to answer it now. I'm just saying that would help me make a more informed decision.
Yeah, so if you remember, I think,
No, I'm not asking you to answer it now.
we have answer.
But
So,
we don't have time. So maybe.
And
if
I
you
feel
want-
like it's something that people who, because this wasn't on the agenda, would be interested to
Right.
know. I'm just putting it out there as a talking point for when it is on the agenda. So that we can address it.
So we do have a rationale for how we got to 8% and it does reflect town strategy. The question that we need input on.
Yeah.
Right now, this is written as a target, right? What does that mean exactly?
Mhm.
In effect, that when you read the next two sections about each of the funds, that becomes in effect a maximum, in part because the E and D is statutorily limited to 5%. Stabilization does not have a limit and does not have a requirement once we set a target, how we deal with that. So that's up to us, and that's the language that we've recommended is how we deal with excess E and D. And how in the stabilization fund, we have recommended language for what we do when the total goes above 8%. Okay, so that's for consideration, to A, make sure that comes across clearly enough, and B, that we all agree that's the appropriate way to do it. In both cases, we tried to clarify that we are prioritizing capital investments. Right, we've tried in our past practice with reserves is for capital, emergencies, that kind of thing. We have left the door open in quote unquote extraordinary circumstances. We could choose to apply it to operating. Right, if that term is unclear, we need input on it. Right, but we leave that undefined so that school committee can determine whether or not that moment constitutes a situation that needs to be addressed.
And the whole idea of having a reserve policy, we just not have one, business as usual. But the whole idea to have one is to make sure that we can show that we are responsible. That we are responsible in managing our cash, our reserves. So not too much, that we are keeping all too much cash on hand, that we have a direction of how we want to utilize the access if we define the access. And then also to make sure that we have also enough to make sure the administration and the school district can, have and know how to use the reserve that we have. And here it actually specifically lay out, how we should use it, for what purpose, and when do we need to, push it over to the operating budget, and when we do not do that. So having a guideline is useful for us to kind of have a, during the budget process especially.
So I'm gonna say that, again, having received this today, I've got a whole page of notes and questions and things, but it seems like maybe the most important thing would be for you to let us know what you want from us, since again, this wasn't an agenda item, and I know I need time to contemplate this before I can't just tell you off the top of my head, because it's gonna get.
We're not asking you to, we're trying to give you a sense of what we're asking for.
Okay,
So the question about the target, right, the 8%, right
Yeah.
now it is framed as a target, right? So one of the questions that we have for you that I think Pam actually put in the,
Right.
with the communication about this is, does that come across as a maximum? Does that come across as a, we want to be around that? And or do we need to articulate a minimum? So while kind of the maximum would help send the message to towns and whatnot that, we are not keeping quote unquote too much, right? We're keeping a reasonable amount for emergencies and capital. At the same time, the whole reason for the reserve policy was because we need to maintain our credit limit. We need to maintain enough for, if the boiler goes out, right? So is it useful to specify a minimum as well? Right, so that we hold ourselves accountable to a minimum level, not just a target level.
and that includes some assumptions, because for instance, I might feel that it's important in a policy philosophically to include the minimum, but not to set a maximum.
Yep. That could be.
To leave the maximum open to our statutory requirements, and for instance,
Except there is no statutory maximum except for E and D.
right, and in stabilization is for specific uses, and
No, we have, so this is one thing we spent part of the reason this took us a year and a half is because our definitions of reserve changed multiple times along the way. what we've been reporting out for several years of what constitutes our reserves included 4 or 5 different accounts, including the school choice, which had, the almost, $1.5 million or whatever
Right.
that we recently used for the fields, right? So we in essence had to treat that as reserve. Now that we've spent that on the field and it's getting reimbursed by the towns, we're putting it in stabilization. We no longer have any reason, nor is it best practice, to treat yearly revolving accounts as reserve accounts.
Right.
So we're defining the reserves just as the true reserve accounts, E and D and stabilization.
Okay.
And we specifically say, don't use annual accounts for reserve purposes. And so, with that, we had to clarify, what is the stabilization fund really about? While we've spoken of it as a capital reserve, it is actually a general reserve, given the way it was set up, and this is thanks to Michelle's research here. So that when it was set up, it can be used for any purpose for which school committee can authorize funding, not just capital.
Okay. And in the past, it has been used for instance, parity between Memorial and Essex Elementary with the Memorial Elementary project. So my experience with the stabilization fund has been that there were specific uses, maybe not required, but in practice put forward. So
I can clarify that, and I don't mean to cut in front of Erica, but the clarification there is that interest income from the loan on Memorial School is to be dedicated to parity, not all general stabilization funds, but stabilization was where it's at. Sorry.
No. I just want to say, so we really have done as much work as we could to get this to you guys tonight, because it has been quite clear that you wanted it from us soon. So here it is. And I think that the issues that we need direction on have been circulated to the committee. So unless you have other questions for us, I think it makes sense time-wise for you guys to take this, have a chance to look at it, look at the directional questions that have been circulated, and we can put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
So you want a response to these bullet points? There's only one question in there. And that's okay.
I think, like Erica said, it seems like we will need some more time to process.
Oh, we're definitely.
So then process. We don't have to talk about
We
it
don't have
anymore.
We were really just trying to respond to what we understood as, some urgency to present something to the committee. So here it is. Everybody can take it, look at it, and we can have a broader discussion when you've all had a chance to absorb it, unless you have anything else you want us to answer that will help you look at it. Okay.
I do. In answer to Jake's question, I do think it's important to have a lower bound as well as the upper bound. I think that the upper bound sends a message to our town partners that we are not fiscally irresponsible and that we're not hoarding money away. I think that the lower bound sends a message to our communities that we are being responsible in reserving enough money to maintain the capital resources that we have.
And that's exactly the kind of conversation we're trying to spark at our next meeting.
My feedback for you for tonight, and then I will send my email, is that if we're going to separate out E and D and stabilization, which makes sense because actually the conversation about this was mostly about E and D, that's something that keeps getting brought up. That was sparking this also, is that I will not be comfortable supporting a policy on the stabilization, especially if you're finding that it's different from, the actual situation, different from what we've been using that term for, until I understand the history of our stabilization fund, where it usually lies, what it's used for, so what the highs and lows have been on that. So some better understanding for me about where that's been and going. So that would help me be able to support something moving forward. And I appreciate the urgency. Again, what I've been asking for is not necessarily a draft. In fact, I think I said a few times, you don't have to draft a thing. What we're looking for is for you to come to us and say, these are the questions we need answered. It may be that that's the easiest way to do it.
But you need the draft in order
It's
to.
really, it's really hard to have a big, broad theoretical discussion without some
And that's fair. That's fair. So,
Thank you, guys.
okay.
They're all still high budget.
All right. Any other general update? As if that's not enough policy and program.
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you very much. Superintendent's report.
I can go now. I'm also very flexible and can be put toward the end, but it's just a few school updates and then some stuff on feasibility, which we can talk about. But I feel badly because we have the dog.
Yeah.
I don't think answers.
How about we reorganize to do the special, the Manchester Police Department Comfort Dog Program presentation. Officer Locke, would you like to join?
Right then.
Come join us at the, whatever you like.
Daisy is most answerable.
Okay.
Make sure she gets that fan well.
That,
Doesn't matter.
for me. Maiden love. Oh my God. That. This, here, wherever you like.
I'll try to get some this.
Okay.
You know, when you want me to.
Okay. So this is Daisy. She's the newest member of the police department, a 6-month yellow lab. And she lives at home with myself, my 2 children, and my husband. It's been an adventure so far. And then we're just kind of taking it day by day and figuring it all out. She's still very much a puppy. We haven't done training yet, so we're kind of in the works of it all. Okay, so slide, the background of benefits. Most police departments in the North Shore have already looked into or in the process of getting comfort dog. Actually, Essex Police just called me yesterday and they're looking into getting one for the town of Essex also. So I think it's a new and up and coming kind of thing that people are finding great benefit from. I think in schools, it's very beneficial for stress and anxiety. And who doesn't have that in life? And not just that, but students have it for everything. But they can't get away from things on social media, tests, sports, parents, they live crazy lives, and having Daisy or a comfort dog is a great way just to kind of decompress and let them know, she's not going to talk back. She's just going to be there to listen and let you pat her and kind of just be a support. And as far as the police department, so she is under the police department umbrella, and she's a great way to network and community police and outreach and make connections, not only in Manchester and in Essex. The police department was able to fund her. We previously had a canine named Cato. There was money funding left from him. So we were able to transition that money for Daisy. In town, they have a Cooper fund that is for the youth of the town. We have applied for a grant through them, and we asked for the $6,200, which was the cost of Daisy. That application was due, and we submitted it, and we're just waiting to hear if that grant was approved. We have grant money from the mental health funding, so that is also used or will be used in some and that will help there. So that will also be used. Crosby's Market is donating her food
the, Dr. Lamb in town, who has grandchildren in the school, has given a discount for her vet bills. So we are still very much in the process, and it needs to be funded through the townspeople. So we are still working on ways to do that, but it's all kind of so far working out. So some of our ideas is advertising her on social media, a patch program where we were asked local businesses to sponsor her, and she can be a walking billboard for their business for the week or however long we decide. When we have events like the Festival by the Sea, offering T-shirts and such items of her cute little face to help promote her. And I know Bravo by the Sea offered to host a fundraiser where they would donate the pizzas to help get the word out and raise money for her. So we went over the startup costs. The only other cost that wasn't mentioned was outfitting a police car, because when I'm not here in school and she's not in school, we do go back to patrol. So summertime, weekends, or not weekends, but school vacations, things like that, we would go back in the patrol lineup. So we would need a vehicle in case I am at a call and she's in the car. But that is around $9,000, which again is also coming out of some of that grant money. We've covered that. Oh, covered that. Oh, there's my other dog. I have another dog at home, so it's like constant chaos, but it's good chaos. Okay, so benefits of teaming up with myself is help reduce stress, mental health, physical activity. So I think she's a great benefit for just getting out some of the, speaking to Ms. Collins about some of the ACE program here in school and things like that, working on a reward system to help get kids out and get classrooms out to take her for a walk or do projects and help get her, to the startup. But I think for starting classes in our school district, I think working on a reward system and getting her as some sort of reward for those students and getting the physical activities for them would be a huge benefit. And giving them a sense of responsibility. Any of students, especially elementary school students, giving them a task and a purpose is beneficial, because even my own kids are like, oh, I have to take her for, a walk and I have to feed her. So it gives everyone a sense of responsibility. I think he would provide a great connection between the police department, teachers, adults, and the school younger folks, students. And there are a few students who do like to be tardy. And I think some of those students have actually spoken to them, and they said if they were to have an incentive like Daisy, or to come in and know that there's someone there to greet them who's positive and who isn't going to, not that any of us yell, but to judge them and why are they late and things like that, would be a great benefit in helping them get to school, have a positive contact when they get here. I'd love to work for food. So just kind of my thoughts on how to interact with students during U block, kind of be out and about, and that would be a good time to mingle with the high school students, say hello, they're loading in between classes, and that's time for them where they have an opportunity to get their work done on their terms. So that would be a great time to interact with them and just say hello. middle school lunches being in the hallway out where the ping pong tables are. Most of the students in middle school do still go outside for lunch, those last 15 minutes. Obviously, if it's cold, raining, things like that, they don't, but that's a good opportunity for her to interact with those students. And visiting elementary school, I was thinking of going to the library and meeting with Samantha and having students read to Daisy as a way to connect with her at that level. And again, she's just listening and not judging their reading abilities. But I think the biggest thing for Daisy is just providing them some sort of stable comfort and being there to help them. So, yeah, so kind of just, I am usually out in the mornings out front, so still as teachers come in, students come in, just being a visible presence for them in the hallways, same thing. Trying not to transition when classes are in session because she's still a puppy and likes to bark every so often and things like that. We don't need the jingling of the collar to have that distraction, kids run out. But I think if they're moving about in the hallways, kind of that would be our time to be out and seen and have kids say hello in a timely, manner. But also she still is a dog, so would have to go outside and things like that. But I think for the most part, just being here, so many kids have asked, when can they meet her and how can they see her? And it's already, they haven't even met her, and but it's already had a positive impact on them. I feel like them knowing that she's here has kind of made an impact on just even kids I haven't spoken to interact with me, so. The training will happen for 2 weeks in July. She and I will go to the South Shore every morning. So that would be lovely. And then we will do an in-service training once a year, and that would be, she barks at, people with baseball hats all of a sudden. So we would go to work on things that just need correcting. And that would be, Monday works, Tuesday doesn't, so it's pretty flexible. And we would do a lot of socialization in different environments, malls, nursing homes, parks, schools aren't in session, but places that she can get different benefits from the government. Is that it?
Ready for me? I think that was your last slide.
I think that's
So
that.
I guess let me just wrap up and kind of bring for the ask for you guys tonight. So really appreciate you going over who Daisy is, how we got to the point of having Daisy and why we're discussing this tonight. Just a quick look back. We had a committee level discussion 14, 15 maybe, that general time period, maybe 16, about pursuing getting a therapy dog here at school. And some of the things we got hung up on at the time were who's going to be the designated handler, what's the cost going to be, how do we manage it? So we got kind of stuck in some of the concerns about the responsibility we were taking on. And then some of the secondary issues about that I'm sure is in people's minds about allergy with the dogs on campus. So we were passionate, we were excited about it, but we didn't really feel like we could overcome some of the obstacles. So when Andrea approached us, and the department approached us, it's like they did all of the preliminary work for us. So they're taking ownership of the dog, the training, the cost, the way our SRO model works. She alluded to it. We contract with the department for the time she's here during the year, but then she's on duty on all of our off times. So we would be contributing by our ongoing contract with having the SRO on campus. So we would get all of the benefits without a lot of the responsibility and oversight. And I think the admin team I know the admin team all agrees that it supports our strategic goals around social emotional learning and support. It aligns nicely with a lot of what particularly is happening in middle school and elementary schools with areas and time to decompress and center self. And Daisy could be a great asset for kids and adults who need that calming force. So we think it fits with our model. It supports our goals. And we are kind of beneficiaries of a lot of the work that the department's doing. So we're very grateful that they approached us on this. I think what we're looking for tonight is just, there's no formal goal, but we're looking to know that the school committee is in support of us pursuing some of the implementation in pursuing this goal and then taking on the implementation plan that it will take to have some process and protocol to manage this during the day. So can the school committee support us partnering with the department on bringing Daisy to campus?
All right, so we're gonna clarifying questions. We're gonna do one round clarifying questions. So get your question ready. And then we will entertain a motion. Anna, you have a question?
100% agree with everything you said. I have a logistic question. Yeah. So Daisy is owned by the Manchester Police Department, right? Yeah. So what happens when in Manchester or Essex, other communities might have more need of Daisy? For example, the veteran schools or the senior citizens and whatever that might be. And then, so does that mean that the Daisy's time at school will decrease if other communities or the police department will need to address other issues potentially Daisy stuff?
Sure. So Daisy I'm her handler, and my role in my job during the school year is to be here. So I'm assigned here. So she would be with myself. If, God forbid, there was some massive incident where they were calling on comfort dogs for a reason, and they needed them at another school, he would go and probably support those other schools if there was a school shooting or a suicide or things like that, where they needed it. But that's something I would check with everyone before we were to just leave here and go somewhere. The senior citizens and other folks in town, we can also set up things in off hours when I'm not working. So just because, you know, they are needed else, or she's needed elsewhere, we can make those hours work. So it's not the Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 2:30.
There's enough of these, it's time to go.
There's enough, yeah. And I know other groups in town are looking for her, and there are things that she will do, like be it vessel by the sea and things like that, but those can be scheduled in the hours that aren't school hours.
Jake, do you have a question? You're just going right around the circle here.
Sure. So, I guess my first one is, I'm assuming that the Manchester Police Department would do this even if Daisy were not here at school. Like, for example,
Yes.
if allergy was
Yes.
such an insurmountable thing that she couldn't be here,
Correct.
Manchester still has value and use of
Yeah.
Daisy.
So the town has approved Daisy. If it were to not be something the school committee and the school would be in favor of, she would then go to another officer who would then be the handler, because I'm not giving up school. So the police department, no matter what, is taking on the role of Daisy.
Because I think that the biggest question that we had when you first introduced the idea and that you've mentioned again is allergies.
Correct.
Have you thought through yet what that looks like?
Yes, so I have a son who has a tree nut allergy, and at the age of 3, he's kind of known to ask when he goes to a birthday party, does it have, nuts in it and things like that. So I think, especially at the middle school, high school level, people are aware they have allergies, and can stay away from, and I can certainly stay away from Daisy if family members or the students send me an email. And also, people come to school who have pet their animal in the morning and have it on their clothes and things like that. So I think the biggest thing would be working on keeping away from those students, and then making sure I'm aware of kind of what's on my clothing, everyone's kind of aware of when they're patting, if there's teachers allergic, hand sanitize, wash, and then head to class. So that they're not potentially spreading or giving that, having somebody have a difficult time breathing.
That's where we're going to start to put together implementation plans. How does management, how have schools that implemented this managed it, what are some of the best practices? So I think we feel that we can overcome that one.
So Gloucester, the Gloucester SRO, Peter Cetera has ACE in Gloucester in the middle school. And he's done wonders with his job as SRO and the kids in the middle school. So it's a very big asset for Gloucester. I mean, that's what, and when we were approached by the two students about getting a comfort dog, they put on a little presentation for myself and the chief. And we brought Ace in and they talked to Pete, Officer Cetera. And it was just very good program.
Pete, you have a question? My question is, prefaced with, I am in full support of this. We're not in discussion, but I have to tell you that because my question is going to make it seem like I'm not.
That's a,
But I am not a dog person. Never have been, not gonna be.
get it.
And I know from experience that it is not easy to not be a dog person in this area when harassed dogs, they're children.
Yes.
And I don't want your dog on me.
Correct.
I don't care how friendly he is. So maybe this is part of the implementation plans, but how can someone commit to me that there's going to be an intentional outreach for the people who are going to sit silently by and not be the jerk that says, I don't want the dog on?
Nope, I get that. So we are still in training, so that is something we will continuously work on. However, if there's one student in particular who I have seen a few times out and about in Manchester who does not care for dogs, and she has started to just slowly and walk away.
Yeah.
And so it may never change. But I think that if those people know they have an allergy or know they are not a dog person, send an email. And that way, if it's you and I just walking down the hallway, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. So I'm happy to just do an about face and walk the other way. Because, and even if we're in a classroom and you're in there and we get called in for something, know that I would never be like, hey, Teresa, did you missed patting Daisy today. So, and know that, so that I don't, and nobody calls you out or, right. And I can help deter and, navigate those areas for those students. So if we put something and make sure parents know to send an email or, just so that I'm aware and I will do my best to make sure that.
All of those pieces managed by the principal designated or delegated to someone that they're overseeing in terms of kind of daily rules, regulations, whatever else.
Someone is in charge of identifying.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume here in the high school about the deans being frontline on having protocols and information protocols. My understanding of the comfort dog is more, it's there for you as a resource. It's not necessarily going to be forced upon everybody.
I wouldn't expect class to be right on that, but there will be people who don't want to be the one that says no thanks.
Right.
And I would teach children to say no thanks.
Yeah.
So.
And if I know, it's I will definitely, make them keep, us aware.
Thank you. John, you have a question?
I have no questions. I think I talked to Mark about this. It's changed, so
You got your question.
you covered everything.
Erica, any questions?
Just one comment. I just read the other day that if you stare into a dog's eyes for 10 seconds, you have an automatic reduction in blood cell levels. So that's my fun fact for the night. I think it's awesome.
Does it matter the intent with which you stare down?
Maybe not for Teresa.
This dog seems lovely. It's not a personal thing.
No.
All right. Okay, so we have done our clarifying questions. Is there a motion on the table? This is, we're voting to take a, yeah,
To support the effort to bring the service,
partner with,
to partner with the police department to bring Daisy to the new level. So all schools,
to the school district.
all schools,
Yes.
including us.
Yes.
Including us.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Don't we have a policy now for us on campus?
No.
I think we change that first.
Yeah, the discussion.
Oh,
Yeah, we need to do that.
That's on the list.
One could interpret it, yes, we can interpret it in a lot of ways, but if we go forward tonight, the next level of this is, okay, what do we have on the books that has to be updated? And what does the attorney recommend that we put in place that we don't have? And then what are the daily operationals?
Any other discussion?
Just the other thing to put on that list, if you're gonna do things like advertise on the dogs, we currently shy away from advertising in school, so
Oh, yes, no, it wouldn't be,
It'd be a pack.
yeah, it would be a patch, not a,
I mean, it'd be the same thing as someone wearing a Bravo t-shirt in school.
I understand, but it's advertising, so I just want to say that, you know, we're dealing with advertising policy as well, so, and we've been trying to avoid advertising in schools, so I just want to say that kind of thing needs to be thunk through of it in part of the implementation plan.
Do we consider animals to be wearing apparel in under the
I
non-dress
think
code
there's-
as opposed to?
I don't want to make assumptions, but
Yeah.
if I understood correctly, one of your fundraising ideas would
Correct.
be to sell Daisy gear.
Yeah.
Outside of school.
correct, yeah, nothing would be here.
A student,
No, but I also heard you say that you would sell advertising that Daisy would wear during the day.
She's not, we're not selling it, it's people sponsor Daisy.
That's a minor distinction, it's advertising. Right?
she won't be wearing a Bravo vest to school.
No. She'll be wearing a police patch.
Yeah. We'll do it in the summer and then. Yeah.
I hear. I get
Any
it.
other discussion?
I get it.
No. In our discussion, I would just like to make note again of the awesome work of students bringing this
Yeah.
up and bringing this forward and the incredible work that comes from our civics program. So,
Can we have a shout out to students or is that not? allowed?
yeah.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
wrote something, I'm sorry. They did write something, can I say it?
The chair recognizes Ms. O'Rourke to read a statement from students involved.
So this is from Scarlett Lee and Kate Bent. They were unable to join us this evening, but they said hello. We apologize for not being there today. We believe that a comfort dog would be a wonderful addition to our school's community. Throughout the process of proposing to the police department to get a comfort dog, we have learned so much about civics and the process of making change in our school and in our community, as well as the many mental health benefits of having dogs in learning environments. We hope that you vote in favor of having Daisy at our school so that other students can benefit from and learn about comfort dogs. Thank you for your. Thank you. And they said no to a comfort cat. That was my suggestion. So we're on the same page.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Thanks for overcoming all the obstacles in advance. We like that.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Later, dog. All right.
It's true, no dog people.
Yeah. All right, so also, I would like to take next on the agenda, the special education program review report, so we can invite Patrick Barbieri and Sally Smith to join us. Yeah. Oh,
I'd
now it's
like to, I wanted to introduce our two CPAC facilitators first. And it's been waiting a little bit.
I didn't
so,
realize we had that happen.
I know, and I whispered over to Pam over there. So I just want to introduce, we have had a relaunch of our CPAC this year. And I want to introduce Caitlin Epps and Elizabeth Crowley Burns, who are our new CPAC facilitators. And do you want to just say hello and anything about kind of what we're working on or what your hopes are? Sure. So, yes, here.
Do you want to?
Yeah, please, around the table. Front and center.
Let's do that louder, Ed. Yes, asked. CPAC for the record is.
Special Education Parent Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth. I am a parent of a child going in an AP in Essex Elementary, and I have a son in the high school on a 5-4. And I'm Caitlin Epps. My daughter Avery is in kindergarten at Manchester, and she's an IB, and my son is. It's been an amazing experience, and so when Allison came to us about this, I was there, of course, so absolutely joining this morning. So we had just begun discussing with Allison on what our next steps would be. We don't really have like an official. So the things that we wanted to do were to become contacts for parents in the communities, be able to share information and our experiences with parents, as well as determine events. So the different events that the special education department provides for parents to be able to maybe recommend other events, create a calendar, and different ways of communicating with about those events. Yeah, kind of bringing the community together in slightly different ways than planned for the full school, and acting as a way where we can point people for resources or questions of general processes if they're new to the process and whatnot, without kind of overstepping Allison's work, but really focusing on the community building with the families that may be in district, but also out of district with their kids. And so, and making them feel still really Manchester. I think another one of our objectives was to build that connection within the towns and the different committees within the town. Yes, I'm also on the APA committee in town. One of the things that I felt like would be really great was making sure that some of these parks and rec activities that go on, different things that are happening, that we realize within the APA committee that some of those things are taking a step further to be accessible or maybe created just for students with disabilities and higher needs, because a lot of times they are not accessible to the students that IEPs and whatnot. Different foundation, be it sensory, more attention and whatnot. And how can we really make sure that the town is getting involved in wrapping their hands around these families, our families, and offering services to them.
Thank you so much for stepping up and helping with this effort and just for coming and introducing yourself. Really appreciate it.
Excited to have it back in action.
Yeah, we'll come back as we have different plans to report on. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a little background. We started this project a while ago. Didn't notice. And I think the goal was to have something shareable by the end of last year. All the end of last year got a little crazy for us. And it kind of fell into some more feedback sessions and back and forth this fall with a final wrap. We finally wrapped probably sometime around December, and then trying to get it on the calendar. So it's really just been between scheduling and other events, something that has been bumped on and off the agenda for some time now. What this is just part of our internal practice of cyclical self-evaluations, where we team with one of the collaboratives. I think if you go back in the record, you'll see a couple of EDCO reviews from 15, 16, yeah, around that time period, which helped launch us into our literacy overhaul. For some of the findings in that, and now coming out of COVID and going into a new round of self-evaluation. So this is just a share. Allison's already been hard at work on some of the feedback that we've received, but it was our practice then, and I anticipate we'll continue it forward, that when we do these reports, we ask those who would come and share. So I'll turn it over.
Great,
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So we'll introduce ourselves and just to say that we're doing kind of a brief overview of the report, a deep dive, but it's been like 3 points that we felt that were just important to talk about. My name is Patrick Barbieri. I'm one of the education consultants. My background in special education, I was the executive director of Lab Collaborative. So I was there for 32 years. One of the things I think that we bring to these consultations and being part of the collaborative, we work with 75 different districts, so you see what everybody is doing. So when we come to a district, we don't try to make one district into another, but able to see what the strengths and weaknesses are of the district and offer what we can to try to just help them move forward.
And I'm Sally Smith, and I've been in education for as long as Patrick, maybe even a little longer. My last job, I was the Director of Student Services for Belmont Public Schools. Prior to that, I had been early childhood coordinator, an integrated preschool teacher, an autism inclusion specialist, worked with kids with dyslexia. So a wide range. And I come from a family of educators of 2 teachers. Primarily, my mother was a first grade teacher. But I tell the story when I went there, it was like the kids that interested me when I went to her classroom to help out with the kids that either couldn't really sit still, they really went into them, or they needed things presented differently. And those kinds of kids really fascinated me to figure out how can I help this child to access, the curriculum. And that's to go off to do that.
Thanks a lot. So, part of the evaluation, we do a set of accommodations, and as Pam said at the beginning, not all districts do these evaluations. So when the district does that, they're really looking for feedback. And it looks like, Manchester-Essex has done that system. And that's a really good thing. You may know exactly what we're going to write the report, but maybe not the recommendations. So that's a really good thing. Not all districts do that. The staff here, I gotta say, when you're interviewing staff, it's a big part of what we do. People get nervous, they interview, but it's not about that. We're looking at programming and services, but they were wonderful to talk to. We thought we made them comfortable to say really what was on their mind because we want to hear their feedback. But they were great. And we teachers, administrators, support-related services, paraprofessionals, we interviewed everybody.
And we were really clear from the beginning when we sit down to interview that we're not evaluating them. I often say, sometimes the report kind of writes itself because maybe you as a teacher are thinking this, but you really don't want to say anything, that they're new or whatever. Or, some people are more vulnerable. So this is a time for them to really share. What Patrick and I like to do is also ask if they have a concern, do you have some ideas of how we might, work on this together and collaboratively, right? That's really helpful to include them.
All right, excellent. Some of the accommodations that we see, when we first walk into the schools, I never really been in Manchester-Essex schools. This is really the first time. I thought I was in every district before, but wasn't in great schools. But, some of the stuff that we saw right off the bat is quality inclusion. We move, we try to talk to districts about this all the time. With the co-teaching that we saw going in the classrooms was just natural. If I had not known in some cases who was a teacher who was the SPED liaison, I wouldn't have known. Those are good qualities. Not that it happens in every single classroom, but we saw it happen a lot, and that's wonderful. The related service providers, SLPs, OTs, PTs, we asked them a lot of questions just about how they do their services. What's the philosophical basis of how they do it? The ones that we interviewed, we saw they work together, they talk, we want to see a good balance of push in and pull out services. You see one or the other just doing it, you have a nice blend. They kind of told me the story about what they were doing, how they were doing it, what their thoughts were, and where they wanted to be. It's a great conversation. So all the therapists I interviewed, I felt were always on the cutting edge of looking at what's the next thing.
And what was actually nice about that, they tell us stuff in interviews, but we also go in and observe. So we were actually able to go in and see, here's co-teaching. The SLP is doing, this, or the PT, they're co-treating. So it's not like we just heard it. We got to see it. And we might even say in the interview, when we're having secretary set up the observations, these are a particular time that we might see a co-treatment or whatever. That's really helpful.
The model of the high school learning strategy liaisons and the middle school moderate liaisons model. That was a model that I was just impressed with. I met with all the staff. I think I met with the high school staff first. Just ask them a little bit, how do they modify the curriculum? How do they work with general education teachers? That's a big sign, when general education and special education come together and work effectively, that's when the kids get the best services. So I asked a lot of questions around that. They were very, they seemed like they really had it down. They really knew their stuff. Then I went and I observed them and I saw they did their good job. And I had little conversations afterwards just about, how did you get the information to be able to modify the curriculum for these students? And just, and they would explain to me, hey, the teacher will send it to me and everybody does it a bit differently. The important thing was that everything was modified, everything was, at the student's level where they could participate.
I have to say, beyond the interviews, we often say, and we just say to the staff, you might be driving home and thinking, oh, I wish I'd said this, or I want to clarify something. But we make sure we leave our contact information, and then they have gotten in contact with us and say, I don't think I quite got this right. Can we talk about this? And that just makes it better when we're putting a report to you.
You have high quality in-district programs. I've seen, this is what we did at Lab, so I've seen them all. And a lot of districts obviously send kids to us. It just was great to just see some quality programming to be able to keep kids in the district, and that's really what was happening. Their whole program is outstanding. I think I've told many people.
I was just gonna say, I confess, because we go to other districts, as they're trying to put a program like Rural together. Now, call Allison, go look at because it really is very, very good.
The transitions, high school, I think that was the first interviews that I was doing. When I heard about what their philosophy was, kind of what they were trying to get for the students, it was very much what I saw when I was in the collaborative students coming to us for. So it was nice to be able to see the collaboration, not just with the teacher and him understanding what the students in these transition programs need, but also with the social worker that was working with them. They worked well together and what they were trying to do. So I was very impressed with that. ACE program, again, was when I first saw that at the middle school, was immediately impressed with how the students were just taught the methodology in the class. The teacher was outstanding. The participation that was going on in the class, the curriculum, I met with the teacher after I observed the lesson. And along with that, the data that's taken, to be able to match with the students' progress, we ask for that all the time. We want to see good models of how that's done, because if you go to an IEP meeting, really got to show all the students making progress or not, what interventions they can do. So that was great to see. Preschool program.
And also, there's a strong preschool program here, and we want to have a strong preschool program. It's the first introduction of whether it's a child with needs or a community student that pays tuition. They're little kids, and parents have to feel comfortable sending their kids off to preschool. And I think it's a very welcoming staff. There's good teacher ratios. I like the collaboration between the staff, the assistants, all good stuff. And we'll talk a little bit later. We're all seeing that in all the communities, we're seeing more and more kids with complex needs. We're saving babies, the medical stuff. But we really need to think about keeping kids in the least restrictive environment and what might we need to add to any of these programs as we go forward to keep them in a quality least restrictive environment. We'll talk a little bit more about that today.
Okay. So we're just kind of getting to an overview of some of the recommendations that we touched upon. And it's not going to be too in depth. We should get a sense of what we're looking at. So Sally was talking about, one of the, you're having more students that are coming in at really young age on the autism spectrum. That's not something that's going to slow down. I mean, that's something that we have to prepare for. So I think, Allison would be really poised to be able to work with it, but We also need the resources, we need additional staffing, you'll need a lot more to be able to keep the students within this restricted setting. But it's definitely it's gonna increase more and more, so it behooves the district to start planning right now to be able to serve the students.
Just ask clarification about that. Real quick. Is that a population trend that, or is that specific to us?
Yeah, we're seeing it all
It's taken a lot. Yeah.
As I talk to early childhood people, it's not so much the numbers that are up, it's the needs of the students that come.
And more intensive environmental services. I think it's like not all districts will get it at the same time, but the ones that we do the evaluations for, we're definitely seeing. Thank you.
Can I just give a quick data point that this year in particular, and the number, much different than last year, between September and July, we will have had 7 children enter who are on the autism spectrum. And, we're a small district, so that's very atypical. It's been, in prior years, it's been 1 or 2 students, but just our numbers have been really high this year. I mean, that's probably an aberration, but we do see an upward trend.
If you look at the cost around 7 students, that could be pretty significant. Better to be in district and do that than out of district that has service. The next slide. One of the things that we had discussions about, and it's in the report, I saw, teams in swing. And, as you're creating programs, we understand that things are created sometimes, in the moment. And again, it's a certain cohort of students being a small district. You may not always have the vertical alignment, but you try to do the best you can. We had some conversations about ACE and swing because there was some overlap. I was just trying to understand the differences of the students. From a parent perspective, looking at program descriptions. For 1 year it may be this, but the next year it changed. So we just had some discussions of, either just making it ACE or just making it swing, and just having one program with one description. We'll get to that a little bit later in the fall when that was done. It was a good discussion.
I have to say, it really helps that Patrick and I work together because he'll call me and say, I'm a little confused on ACE and swing. What did you see? What do you think? And so we go back and forth, and then we go back and ask more questions.
Yeah, so it was, we talked about it, in the classrooms and again, serving the students and whatever's going on. And I don't know everything about every single student. One of the things that we talked about was one-to-ones for students. That's a whole dialogue about how that's done, how it should be done. And there's just a lot of confusion around it. Again, we talk philosophically around that and looking at student being as independent as possible. There has to be some criteria on what would be the basis for a one-to-one, and you have to reevaluate that. Not just do it and say, well, that's going to happen. So we had some discussions around how that could happen. And at the end of the year, we look at it, the team meets, and move forward. So
I have to say that is a concern that comes up in a number of districts. I think more is better. Was throwing aid, but without any data or anything. We both realize that in certain situations, a student comes in and you quickly, because it's a safety issue or a medical issue, you may, have an aid start right away, hopefully with the right training. But you really need to take the data. What's the role of the data in this situation? And the data in a lot of districts has not been in there, and so I really like before you're assigning leads here, whether it's to a classroom or one-to-one, what's the criterion? And you meet every so often and say, this was our goal. And this is where we are now. Do we continue it? Do we decrease it, decrease it? And not just have it blanket in the IEP, know that there's an aid and that never goes away. It's not good for kids.
all right, next slide. All right, so we interviewed the chairpersons of the SPED coordinators of the entire our schools. And who's chairing IEPs and who, it's an important role to be. A good IEP run well can really save you from a lot of problems. So again, people that we met, wonderful. And we felt that, within a chairperson's role as a sped coordinator, that they should really be in an administrative position. And, it's, when you look at being on the same level as a teacher, who's observing you and who's evaluating you, we would go to the Memorial School, the preschool, and Allison was like omnipresent. She was everywhere, going and really meeting the needs of the staff. But how does she do all of this? She can't be at all the meetings or being up, just, you don't want to miss something that you wish you knew before, or just was aware of a meeting or what was going on. And we've been in other districts where we made this recommendation. They're going to be observing and evaluating, or they should be doing that. Should just be one person. And also, you need to have somebody at the meetings that, by the law, so that can make resource decisions. Right? So, if somebody is uncomfortable in the meeting, and have advocates there and saying there should be somebody there making resource decisions, that person may need to step out. All of a sudden, and that's not how you want it to go. You want it to be transparent. So those reasons, and also just to have that confidence from staff that that person's administrator, they're coming to my meeting, they're supporting me, that feels comfortable to staff with that person's there. So we recommend that. We understand that there's budget issues sometimes, but sometimes it's really should. Okay. All right, so this is a bit of a finance kind of discussion, and this becomes a little complicated. To be able to deep dive in it, we got to kind of look at other numbers across the state. But I just want to offer some perspective on what it means. There's some charts that I put in the report that reflect some data. And so there's one chart in that states what the overall percentage of the monies are spent within a district on special education. So when we've done this, and I've been part of so many district discussions about it, sometimes somebody will look at that number and they'll say, where's our number so high compared to the one district, within the Commonwealth? Or we need to get that number down because they're only looking at the number. So I think it's 25%. It just wasn't the time that I got the data. And that number really means kind of where you're, so if I was working with one district and I thought that there was a 25%, another district 25%, that doesn't mean they're doing the same job or they are efficient doing the same job. What it really means is that that's what the number reflects. So when you go in the district and you look at something like Manchester-Essex, I wouldn't care if that number was 30%, only because most of the students are staying within districts, so resources are going towards that. So what happens is, I think you get money in circuit breaker and things like that, but the cost to keep students in district, becomes a little bit higher, but you're avoiding costs too. So this cost avoidance piece becomes really important. Because if you had it was $30,000 a year to another district placement, depending on where they are, that's added on to the tuition is. So when I looked at Manchester-Essex, I put it in there and I wanted to explain it because I think continuing to put resources into the districts, even if it went up to 26%, right, doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. You are in a good situation. You don't have a whole lot of kids going into the district. It's not a problem. Where I did a district a few years ago, that number looked fairly low, but they had a lot of students going out of district, paying a lot of transportation costs. They could be saving by creating more quality programs. So it's an important distinction to understand when you look at that number. It's working well in Manchester, and we continue to give more resources to it as long as we create quality programs.
And if we create those quality programs at a young level, okay, then it's better for kids to be in the least restrictive environment that they continue on in the least restrictive environment. If we don't have a quality program, let's say preschool or elementary, then there's a good chance that parents are going to come and say, this is not working, my kid needs to go out, and then you're getting to high costs as well as transportation
And that's a good point. The vertical alignment is extremely important to parents because you want to know where the next placement is. One of the things that we evaluate is how the staff talk about transition. You know, when does it happen? How smooth is it? And everybody knew their role. You know, when we meet in January, we go up and we talk to the teachers and we have a meeting. Those are good signs because otherwise, if a teacher doesn't know how to explain the next program, parents kind of lose confidence, so they're like a little bit shaky about where their son or daughter is going to go. That's in the report too. We mentioned a little bit. And it also should be documented exactly when it happens. It's really, it makes it worthwhile just for the parents in the district to know as well.
That's a credit to Manchester-Essex and Superintendent Allison in terms of having a documented transition schedule. So people know we believe it or not, we go into a number of districts and even this time of year, people are saying, oh, we just have an end of the year meeting, you know, and the parents come in and there's no one from kindergarten, there's no one from the seventh, you know, the middle school level. And that's problematic.
It works sometimes. All right, next slide. Yeah, it's just part of this, you know, when you look at staffing and resources within the district, you know, it's, when you have students, 7 students on the spectrum, you know, you're going to have more staffing. You have to have more support-related services. These things need to be graduated. You don't want to get behind the ball, you know, as things start, the quality of the program suffers, then you start adding staff to try to make up for it. Stay ahead of it. Look who's coming. It's a little overwhelming, students, but when you're working with it, you gotta put the resources towards the staff. And the resources in the curriculum and the technology here, again, I should have put that in accommodations. I felt that the staff really felt that they were getting what they needed to be able to, you know, do whatever their job was in the classroom. So that should be really an accommodation.
And just going along with the staffing, I just want to reiterate, I am so glad that you're really looking at professional assistants or aides, you know, and versus, oh, just if you throw an aide in, that'll be fine. We need to look at situations where there's more involved kids. Maybe we take the money from like 3 or 4 aides and we're able to get a teacher. And whether it's 2 teachers in a program versus a teacher and 4 aides. And we do see that in districts. So that's an important piece. And by taking that data, you're going to know really more bank you're not better for kids, parents, and everybody. Put it into the teaching staff and the related service providers.
Last of the recommendations being professional development comes up quite a bit in the districts that we evaluate. Again, we didn't see, nobody was complaining here about professional development, but you know, we're working with the districts at and going to the next level. You know, these are just recommendations about putting, you know, a team together. You know, sometimes they can free school certain, you know, they feel like not everything is relevant to them or support related services. Well, you know, we do some wonderful professional development. We just need more things around student showing, you know, for what we do. And that's just kind of given them a sense of we should have some input into that. The other part of professional development is always keeping an eye on the relationship between general education and special education. Never let that, you know, go. Just make sure that it's something that's being talked about. Again, I think the liaisons create those relationships, and that's really good. But really, you know, what are the roles and responsibilities? It's a para going in, so they know what the expectations are. When it's really clear, everybody's on the same page. It doesn't become my job this year. So,
Sorry, David.
no, that's good. You're the next one. So, you know, we've been in touch and Allison is organized. She's keeping status of kind of what the recommendations were and the updates. So we just thought it would be something, you know, that we should go over. Do you want to go over that since you did it?
Sure.
And these are all the recommendations that we, maybe a few more that we added as well, but we know that there's barriers to some of the recommendations. We know that it can't be done. Some districts, we make 5-year plans. So this is what it'll look like in some of the recommendations, so.
We can, so all of this was embedded in Patrick and Sally's presentation, but because there was some time that passed between the completion of their report and this presentation, we're just talking about recommendations that were already underway. So we had looked at this suggestion of adding some kind of a supervisor or a board certified behavior analyst position because preschool, we have a lot of students with autism. I'm just looking at that at some kind of leadership and training position as the program expands. And that is on hold due to the budget, but it is something that we'd like to look at as part of a long-term plan. The suggestion that team chairperson should have more independent contracts and be administrators. We'd have to look at budget implications, potentially discussion with the teachers union because they're now in the teachers union. So that's something that also I would like to look at over time. And there's even some inequity right now in the two chairperson positions, what they're able to do and what their roles are. So I would like to even that out and look at that over time, but again, there's some more steps to get there. And then Pam, if you go to the following slides, there were some that I was able to take quicker action on. Then those are long-term. So with the ACE swing programs, just to give you a very quick explanation on that, we had a long-standing program called Swing. It was for students with severe and complex needs. Over time, the population started to change because we're a small district and that happens a lot. You'll have a small number of students with a certain profile. 5-10 years later, you have the same program, but the population looks really different. So that's basically what happened. So we created a program called ACE. And then there started to be overlap between the two. And at this time, we do not, we have discontinued actually the swing program just based on the profiles of students. The ACE profile is a profile of a student who has significant memory deficits, some language challenges, but they aren't necessarily like medically fragile, nonverbal. So it just the group really changed. There's students who may pass the MCAS. The other group, they were on the MCAS halt. They were probably going to require services until they were 22. So they just kind of split into different directions. And the program name is now ACE. And we updated the program descriptions accordingly. We do have a small cohort of students with more complex needs. For example, some of them have genetic disorders or significant autism. And we do have a small cohort and we need to rename that program as well. But because we're a small district, we have to roll with it. And we have, and it doesn't look the same every year. It unfolds. And sometimes we close a program and we start a new one. We just have to respond to the needs of the students. The complex needs classrooms for the younger children that I just spoke about were more involved. That has now been consolidated at Memorial for next year. So we're always reworking, but that was in part in response to recommendations. We constantly reevaluate our student to staff ratios, but Sally and Patrick did bring up the point that with some of our older students, did they need the ratios that we had? And in one case, I really felt looking at it, like we needed more teaching time and not as much assistant time as we had. So we did take some teaching assistant positions. We took that money and we hired another teacher for the middle school ACE program. Next year, we'll have another teacher for the high school ACE program. The population's expanding. We wanted more teacher time. We didn't need as much assistant time. So just constantly looking at these issues. We did have a criteria for one-to-one students who need one-to-one support, and we've tweaked that a little bit. And that just reflects what I just said. Okay. And just as far as professional development for general ed and special ed, the way that it works in special education is a lot of times we're responding to the needs of the students. Do we have students that might be presenting with a disability or disorder that we're not as familiar with? Like one that was recent was we hadn't had that I could recall students with selective mutism, but then we had a few students with that particular diagnosis, and so we got some training on it. So constantly responding to how the students are presenting. But then there are also sometimes, and I appreciate the feedback about having a committee on this. There's also times when everyone needs the same thing in special ed, and we have this new IEP that is being implemented next year as a result of DESI's IEP improvement project, and so everyone had training in that this year. And as a result, we did some training with administrators on universal design for learning, which was kind of related to some things the new IEP was trying to accomplish. And then I partnered with the curriculum director because we have students in self-contained programs, and those teachers have specialized training for those programs. But what really happens in special ed is most students are included. And because most students are included, I need to work with the curriculum director hand in hand around what is happening when those students go into the general ed classroom. So that's a big part of our focus, and I'm continuing to partner with Heather, who's new, and we've been partnering well around that. And I know she's has some exciting ideas for next year around teacher training that we're working together on. And then there's a suggestion just around, we have district policies and procedures, but looking at what we need and fleshing that out. And that recommendation aligns with the fact that we have our tiered focus monitoring for next year. And so the Department of Ed will be coming in and looking at our policies and procedures. So we're looking at those and reviewing them again as well, just seeing if there's anything new we need, if there's anything that needs to be updated.
I have to say, what's interesting about this is like, you know, we did the report a while ago. Then Pam and Allison called us up to present, you know, thinking, yeah, but the report's like really old now. What are they thinking now? We really went through our heads. But actually, this has been perfect because it's really nice for us. We don't often get, unless we go back and talk to some of the people, the superintendent, are they implementing any? We're not expecting all of our recommendations to be implemented. It's like any report. It's recommendations and decide what makes sense. But it was really cool for us and to know that, wow, they actually already, from the beginning of this year, implemented some of the major things. So this worked well.
We've done the last cycles, just we'll pull these now and put them in our next iteration of the district improvement plan. So
Right.
things you can get right away, get right away, but then we plan on things that are going to be more long-term strategy, like some of the staff.
This worked out well.
Good. Yeah, no, it's like that. Feedback.
Thank you. Committee members, do we have questions? I'm going to just start at this side and go around.
Sure, I have, I guess, have questions in two categories. Some refer to the report and some actually are about administrative aspects of how we are implementing. So I guess we want us to start with questions for the consent.
Just ask your questions. Try to remember there's 7 of us in the room.
Yeah, I'm not gonna pass out. So I think it's easier if I have the report in front of me. I found the tables, I found the whole report helpful, so thank you. And I found the tables particularly helpful just to try to understand, you know, obviously as school committee members, one of the things we're called upon is to figure out our budget and figure out how everything fits into it. And I wondered if you could help me understand, it looks like, well, it is, you mentioned before, 25% of our budget goes to special ed. And the thing that was surprising to me is even though we're doing a really good job with in-district placement, we still seem to be having really high transportation expenses relative to other districts. And I wondered if you have any suggestions, thoughts. I don't know if that came within your purview, but that's just something that jumped out at me if I'm reading these charts correctly.
Yeah, I mean, transportation is just dependent on who the provider is and who, you know, people with a single one going up to bids and all that. It's a tough one. You know, certainly trying to go out there and get the best bids, and some districts have more leverage than others, depending on who the carriers are.
How do some districts, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but specifically, how do some districts have no out-of-district transportation costs?
Yeah, so I think in those charts, they probably should have put something in there, because we don't put the data in, I get it off the chart,
Yeah.
chart data. They could have just not put it in.
Yeah,
I
that's.
mean, it's not that they don't have,
Okay.
you know, which is too bad, because
The data's only as good as we know is what's inputted. And I think about this in terms of disability categories. And in one district, someone might code a child under neurological. In another, it might be social emotional. So it's, you gotta look at that.
And DESI data is DESI data.
Yeah.
And we've had our struggles with some areas and years where things have been misreported. You know, one year it looked like we had 9%, I think. What was it? We had a 9% special education rate. We knew it
that's
wasn't
right,
true.
that's
We
right,
went
we
back and tried to have it corrected. They couldn't correct it. So I think DESI is, it's the only tool out there for
It's DESI.
talks, but it's just, you know, it's subject to error, just like anything
Yeah.
else.
I should appreciate all that. I guess,
I can answer your question.
okay.
So our transportation costs are high, and they're high for a few reasons, and it's a constant issue that we're working on. But there's a few reasons why they're especially high, and before I say that, I should tell you that when we make a list of who needs to be transported, we go out for multiple bids before we make decisions on transportation. So there is a competitive bidding process, but what's driving our costs up a bit is we have, when we send a student out, typically they have very significant needs. Otherwise, they would be in district. So some of the students that we have, they have a monitor on the bus because of safety issues, whether they be medically related safety issues, behavioral safety issues. We have some students who are going quite a great distance because of the complexity of their needs and just out of district placement options, which have narrowed and a lot of places are full. So there's a scarcity around certain types of out of district placements, which can cause a longer route. And we're not exactly right in the center of where placements are too. So that's an issue for us in Manchester. But it's the severity of the needs at times and the distance and the fact that at this particular time, we don't have a lot of students going to the same place. Because when you do, you can typically save quite a bit of money if you have multiple students from the same location. Sometimes we can put our students on a vehicle with students from other communities, and that helps to save money. But those are a couple factors. But I know when Michelle came on board, we had a conversation about it as well. And the collaboratives are doing some study around could they do something to assist districts with networks to help us bring our costs down. So those are just some reasons that I see that are a bit unique to us right now. There will be other years where it might not look exactly the same, but that's some of what's driving it up right now.
And I take it you guys didn't see anything in your report that suggested there was something we could avail ourselves of that would make this cheaper.
Just
Because otherwise you would have pointed it out.
Yeah, I think we get located makes it just a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. If you're in the Middlesex area, you've got a lot of, you know, towns close together, makes it a lot easier. So the same thing goes along with tuition. Somebody will ask me, why is it tuition so? Then you do a deep dive and you realize, geez, you got like 2 tuitions of $200,000. Maybe it's.
Just echo Allison's point. We're part of the North Shore Collaborative. The board is made up of all the superintendents in the area. As board members, we are actively trying to get that organization to help us with localized transportation problems. So we are part of the group that is teaming resources to engage someone to do a regional study to see if we can do anything in terms of mapping better routes or at least to localize. Or, I mean, it's not going to solve getting someone into Metro West or up to New Hampshire, but it can help with potentially piggybacking some runs and looking at the efficiency model for Cape. Rockport is having a greater struggle because I mean, it's 20 minutes just to get from the starting point. Right. So we're doing the best we can to try to leverage our collective resources to come up with some solutions. So it's something that's on everybody's, we're all struggling.
Did you have another question? No, I'll let everybody go. I do have other questions, but they don't make sense. So, do you have a question? That's 10. I'm going to hold off on this question. Go ahead.
All right, well, I have questions. So talking about the so one of the recommendations was that the referral forms and the packets of information should be included in the policy manual for referring students to the specialized programs. So I feel like I'm in a unique position because I'm on the school committee. I have a child on my team, and I don't even know what all of these programs are and where we can find the description of the profile of a student who would fit into one of these programs, or how a parent as a member of an AP team would refer their own child to one of these programs. So I guess that's a question for you, Allison. Do we have that? Is that available? Where does that live?
So we have descriptions for all of the specialized, I mean, there aren't that many, but we have program descriptions for all of the programs. When a program is recommended by the team, parents have access to program descriptions. At times I've been asked for descriptions and I have them. There was a period of time where we put them on the website and it became very controversial and it's asked to actually take them down. And so, which I don't know.
Was it a privacy issue?
It was, there was a concern at the time that we were kind of promoting what we had and that we were trying to have, trying to get more tuition students and that it might undermine the experience and the access of residents. So there was a concern around that. There also is a legitimate concern that, it could cause people to, decide they're moving into the district for the programs. So, which people might consider a plus or minus. I'm not going to say, but that, was another source of some controversy. And so we stopped putting them on the website, but we do have program descriptions and they are available. And also just parents will sometimes ask about different programming, but because it's an individualized education program, it is typically something the team brings up and then would share the description with the parent.
But I hear what Alice is saying, because I know when I was director in Belmont Public Schools, I would have parents with like 2-year-olds, they never call and say, I have a child on the autism spectrum with significant disabilities. When they turn 3, what are you going to offer? Tell me what all your programs and then once they, run that program, where they're going, it's like, you could spend a lot of time. It's like when you have a purchase and sale and you're moving here, yes, call and we'll tell you, we'll go through the process.
Well, and it's a team process.
Exactly.
But I think recognizing that it's a team process and that parents are members of the team.
Absolutely.
Parents should have ready access to those descriptions and the referral forms, right? Because as a member of the team, a parent should be able to refer their child to a program. Not saying that their child then automatically gets in,
Right.
but just saying that then the team considers that referral, right?
Yes, and parents can refer their children to programs and have.
If they have access to the program definitions of the referral.
They don't need a referral form. They just need to say, I'm interested in this program, and they would ask their liaison, can I find out more about that? And then we would talk about it, or parents have just referred. I want to say also that I did a survey of parents, and I did get some feedback that like, we'd like to know more about like, what are all the options, even though it's not necessarily the way that special ed functions, but I do understand the sentiment. So I was talking to the CPAC facilitators a little bit about it too, like, how could we make that just feel a little bit more transparent for people? And I'm open to suggestions around that. When students transition to the middle school, we have an open house or like a coffee for parents of children who are on it, IEPs transitioning, and we have people from all the different programs, and they talk about them and explain, you know, what happens with different programs and offerings to parents that attend the coffee. But maybe it's something we want to do, you know, for parents at the elementary level to just have a coffee for parents that are interested. Yeah, this needs to act as something. So I do, it's been a little bit like, you know, to what degree do we do
Right.
this? And we've had some controversy over time, but I don't want parents to feel that that information isn't available and
Right.
isn't accessible. So it's just, how do we find a balance
But
with
we also
that?
don't want people to feel like, oh, if I move to Manchester-Essex, I'm going to be entitled to these these programs.
And that has been an issue, and I've had a couple of people that have moved for a specific program, and then their child wasn't a candidate for the program. The program was full, and, you know, so, yeah, so that has some problems, but I'm open to suggestions around it. Just how do we make that more available, and maybe it is a coffee or something informal for people that just want to hear more about what we offer broadly.
CPAC up and running.
Exactly. Yes, they will be helpful with that too.
And then my other question is about the sort of like swing ACE program. And it's interesting reading back through the report, and that the report was written a year ago, and now sort of seeing where we are now, because in the accommodation section, we singled out the swing program. It's elementary, and the teacher in the swing program, the TAs in the swing program. Now, a year later, the swing, I think my understanding is that the swing program doesn't exist at Essex Elementary
Or it won't as of next year.
and is being absorbed. Could you talk, Allison, a little bit more about the decision to move that to Memorial, and if there are any sub-separate programs remaining at EES?
Yes, so there is one as of next, there are currently two programs at AES. And it's not swing, it wasn't fully sub-separate, but that was one of the programs. There is another program called ACE, and that program is remaining. And it is a program that currently starts in fourth grade for students who have more memory and processing issues, have some language, like expressive receptive language challenges. So that program is in Essex. I didn't want to move the other program, but here's what happened. We had some students come in with significant special needs. They had actually genetic disorders, and not to single people out, but I did have a student in a wheelchair. So, and we may have other students in wheelchairs. And so there was some concern about what would happen with that at Essex Elementary. And so I decided that I would engage an ADA specialist. Her name's Deb Ryan. She's worked with us before on some issues that we've had in the past. Memorial reconstruction building project. So
Ironically, when Swing was there.
yes, isn't that funny? So yes, yes, I guess they were more accessible at the time, but now we had the expert come and she walked and she measured and she gave us in great detail with me and Jason, the facilities manager and the principal, and we just walked through everything and the amount of money that it would have cost to make that building accessible. I mean, and the time, and we're looking at a building project. Literally, I mean, it would be one thing to make a couple bathrooms handicap accessible, but there are literally ramps that are
My
built
son
into
had a
the
lot of
building.
fun on those ramps
Yeah.
when he
Did he?
was playing and was in a wheelchair for most of it. Yeah, he very much enjoyed those ramps.
Oh dear, yes, so that so they are not up to code.
Right.
And, yeah, I'm sure they were fast because the slope is great. And it's just, how do you modify that for a young child, who's in a wheelchair? So, we decided it wasn't something that could happen. And so we decided that what we would do is, start to have some children at Memorial, and then it became, you've got a few in Essex and a few at Memorial, but Essex is no longer wheelchair accessible, and so we did have to, or they're wrong for anyone with mobility issues, they don't even have to be in a wheelchair. So as a result, we're now at Memorial, we're hopeful that with the building project, that after the building project, we would be able to go back. I don't want to have just one program in a building. But that was the challenge that we were confronted with.
So then the sort of like ripple, we talk about the BCBA's getting pulled, right? To do the FBAs from both from the preschool and from the swing program. And now the ripple effect is that both of our BCBAs are in Manchester.
That is right.
And we don't have one in Essex. And so the recommendations had been to look at hiring another BCBA. Is that something that we should be taking into consideration for the budget next year?
I don't see a need for a full-time BCBA in Essex. The programs that have a BCBA are the programs that are more severe complex needs. Children who have level 3 autism and the preschool, because we have those children just coming in and we do use some ABA methodology.
Are they is an BCBA the person who can do an FBA, a behavioral? Is that why they're getting pulled so often for that, or do we have other staff members who be?
The type of FBA for somebody who has significant autism, like, would be a BCBA. I mean, there's other types of FBAs, but I think the type you're talking about, there
No, I
are
really
like,
just mean like any. It
Somebody
seemed
else-
like from the report that the BCBA's were getting pulled away from their work with the students with these more significant needs in order to do FBAs.
yeah,
Just want to say something about that.
Yeah.
We hear that in other districts, and from the BCBA's, we're getting pulled into a lot of cases or, students that are, yes, they've got some behavioral needs or some emotional needs, but they could be dealt with by whatever you have in the district, school adjustment counselor, psychologist. It's not just doing testing. It's not what else is talking about severe kids on the autistic spectrum that really do need, a BCBA to put programs together.
Right, but we still need somebody who can do the behavioral analysis.
And For students whose needs are a little bit more moderate, there are people that can also do an FBA. Like a school psychologist, school adjustment counselor. I have a teacher who's trained to do FBAs. So it does kind of depend. With our
So we wouldn't need a BCBA just to make sure that we're doing that application, they're not getting pulled away from there.
That is true. And also, it's just important to note that all the people that are BCBAs in this district are also full-time teachers or close to full-time teachers. So, but that was something we were struggling with a bit this year. So, yes, I mean, it was a valid statement that we had somebody who was getting pulled, and so we're doing some just reconfiguration of services. And also we hired somebody in Essex who has a lot of expertise with FBAs and with some behavior analysis, who should also be able to help us out this year in Essex.
So the answer is no, you don't need to have a parent BCBA.
I don't feel that we do. And actually like the model, I don't know, it's like too technical. More than people want to even know, but I just want to say that I like the model of the teacher who's a BCBA, that they're embedding it in their practices. And that's what we.
Jake, do you have any questions?
I have two questions, one very specific about language use and one broader, and I'll ask them both because I think they're related. So the first one is, you've used the term in your report, and I heard you use it here, Sally, co-treat rather than co-teach. And I'm not sure I know the distinction. So I'd like to hear your thought on that. And then at a bigger picture level, we've had occasion several times over the past year or so to look at student subpopulation data, performance data, MCAS data. We all know there's limitations to that, but it's the only data point we have to compare populations, and students with disabilities are consistently our lowest performing population, stubbornly not moving. We've had a literacy program for how long now that we, in part because of, prior reviews. Anything from your external view on our programming, particularly since so many of our students are inclusion, that would give us insight into why that may be the case, or what we could do differently to change that situation for those students?
I'll just quickly answer the co-treat versus the co-teaching. What we were referring to as co-treats is having the related service providers like your SLP teaming up with the OT or the PT and the SLP. I did something with the language motor, and we get a lot more kids are moving in terms of language, and the speech and language person will work on that while the other person is working on motor. So it's more those kind of, I think, co-treatment. Co-teaching, I think it's more teacher, and then maybe a related service provider co-teaching. Not necessarily do I see a paraprofessional unless they're extremely, I see it's more teachers or related service providers teaming up in a classroom. Does that answer that?
The distinction technically.
Second question was,
Yes, of course. That's
Student performance and anything about particularly since so most of our students are inclusion. What you saw, any insights as to why they may be kind of stuck in performance?
Yeah, we didn't go that deep into it to look at that. So we're really looking at their accessing that parallel to modified. To know why the test scores out, we would have to take a little bit of thinking about it. It's a great question.
no, my other thought is that we always talk about inclusion, and I still feel like in all the districts, we have to look at it with all of the staff. Is the student fully included, and are we accessing the general curriculum, and we're not just having them in for a little while, doing their own thing in terms of curriculum? That's around the academic piece. And I think there is a benefit when kids go in just around the social emotional piece. But I don't want to see kids just go in for that, because research shows when they learn, you know, academically along with their typical peers, what they learn tends to improve. Yeah.
So then just a quick follow-up, one of your, I don't remember if it's a finding or recommendation was something around joint ownership of student learning. Can you just explain a little bit what you meant?
Now, in an ideal world, I wish we didn't have special ed and regular ed, or gen ed and special ed. What it really should be, and I don't think it'll be my lifetime, it should be one system, you know, and it wouldn't be like special ed is robbing the money from general ed. But I think we still continue to need to do a lot of training in terms of differentiating instruction, you talked about EDL. We're not there yet. Made some huge inroads, you know, from going from kids pretty much pulled out with substantially, you know, separate programs. But differentiation to access, for all learners to access. In my opinion, it's not there yet, but this is not the whole distance.
So, you know, in most of the observations that I saw, it was working well, and you would hear some teachers talking about, you know, they wish they could get more join togetherness and work. And so it's not like it's a perfect setting. And that's kind of why we went in there with the recommendations of development, both general and special ed. Because they just need to know that they're part of the process, how it was developed, and while it was developed. We proceed, we're always fighting that. But we're always trying to promote the clarity of each other's roles, understanding what it's supposed to be. Yeah, I don't think this is important that we haven't heard that. Still,
For just for an example, like going into a classroom, and let's say the speech and language person is in there, or the aides working with the group of kids. I love it when I can't tell, like, yes, a couple of those kids are, I guess, are on IEPs, but the other couple of kids are struggling a little bit because we all have needs at some point in time, or maybe they're not, they're top kids, but go into the group. Because if you're a good facilitator, you can work with that high functioning child that gets it really easily and the child that doesn't. So it's more that. And I do believe there's times like all kids need a little bit of pre-teaching and review and all of it. Not just our kids who need this special.
Thank you.
Okay, Anna, final question.
Questions, I for sure.
Well, thank you. That was informative in the extreme. Anything you wish to close with on this, or?
I appreciate the feedback, especially the observation that it's an ongoing process and it's very hard to reach our desired outcome. We're reminiscing a bit, or kind of in preparation for our updates on June 4th, we were talking a little bit about progress over time and the pace of progress. And I think when we started our work on developing the special education program back in 2012 was when we started, we weren't an inclusionist. So it's come a long way. It doesn't feel like a short period of time, but there are miles to go. And I think we're back to our mantra of really our goal is to reach all learners and find a way to teach all learners and to pull in general ed and have them have ownership of all students. And I think there's progress, but there's a lot more. On the financial front, you brought up a couple of points. I'll just do a couple of, in addition to working with the collaborative around finding some ways to find efficiencies around transportation. The North Shore superintendents are actively lobbying legislators to take on a few things. I think you're going to see this kind of a superintendent's platform over the next few years, which is a reform committee on Chapter 766. That was 50 years ago. I didn't anticipate so many of the conditions that exist today, but those are some of the regulations that are making it hard for folks like Allison to manage programming. The other piece we're asking them to think about is is Prop 2.5 as being just, when Prop 2.5 meets Chapter 766 and some of the ed reform, it just is all kind of coalescing to say this schools, like, schools that have profiles like ours, which are suburban districts that are really reliant on property taxes, we're getting hit from all sides. And they're, you know, everyone's grateful for the $140 proposition, but that still is going to leave us at 1.5% growth when all of our major variables, including special ed, are growing at 7+. So one thing we're trying to get in the short term is, and you might, well, I'm doing this while you're here because I can never fully explain circuit breaker to people who really want to dig in, is all of the wonderful programming that we've developed in district, we get no reimbursement for. We get reimbursement if we send kids out. So I think there's a hue and cry among superintendents for that. We've answered the call to deal and to address keeping kids in district and having high quality programs for them. Could you find a way to build in a reimbursement factor for us so we can get some of the benefits of keeping kids at home? They're supposed to be here. We want them here, but stop incentivizing sending out.
Sense.
So I should-
Go on with transportation.
So they
There should be something about like circuit breaker for that instead of
Yeah.
circuit breaker, yeah.
Yes, chapter 70.
You're right, you're absolutely right.
2.5. I think we all need to be looked at together and how they work together. If we're ever
Did
gonna,
that come up because it was the 50th anniversary and they decided to look at it? Just-
We're-
I was not going. It's just, right?
it is, I think it's that and chapter 70 are two really sensitive topics that they should, just don't want to take on right now, but tried to make the point.
It's good. It was a pleasure to do this.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your reference. It's always helpful for our town partners and for us to understand what advocacy, it happens to so many.
And it's great to get out and talk to people in other districts. We all have the same problems. Right. And, you know, I think the analogy we made, we're all, it's like a tsunami. Everyone's on the beach and we're fighting our small fights and we're all looking for our little piece of real estate. But we're trying to solve this FY, to your point, Ed, we're trying to solve the $200,000 hole in FY 25, but there's a tidal wave coming at us.
Yeah.
Because it's just structure, we're built to live in structural deficit. And until it's addressed, we're going to have the same Groundhog Day conversation.
Okay, well, we will finish with our last two things, which are actually the things we need to take action on. It's real decisive action on. Jake, I fully support this, but we need you for these votes. Sorry, folks. These are critical votes. So I'm just going right up since we went in reverse on continued business. So fiscal year 25 budget update and clarification vote, as you all either were there to witness after the fact at the Essex Town Meeting, a resident brought forth the issue that when we voted in our budget, we, on February 6th, I believe it was, we did not have a 2/3 majority vote. We had a simple majority at that time. And she's absolutely correct. It would have been helpful to know that in advance. We could have identified and corrected that, but it is there. It's not just statute, which was quoted, but it's also in our own policy, section DBG. So it's not likely to be section DBG. So it's not likely to be mistakenly twice. But the remedy for this, Pam and Michelle worked hard on getting through to people, and my understanding is that the remedy for this is that we take a revote on this. We will ensure that it passes with a 2/3 majority, and that the at town meeting floor, town council conferred with our town administrator who stated that it was still appropriate to take that vote. So that my understanding is that this will be remedied provided we are able to pass this vote that has already been approved at both town meetings with a 2/3 majority. Is that accurate?
Based on our conversation with Desi, this is what they recommend.
This is what they recommended.
Do this, inform them, and then.
Yep.
Should take care of it.
Okay. So we're doing this by way of motion. Is this a clarifying question? Yes.
So we only have 6 people here today.
Yes, so
So
we'll
we
need
have
4.
2/3 of the 6.
Yeah, we'll need 4. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we need 2/3.
Right, so you need a unanimous tonight.
Because we are missing one.
So 2/3 of the full committee, you're saying?
I believe it's 2/3 of the full committee.
Okay, let me see what my sort of policy book says, but the screenshot it.
Policy book is a.
Oh, you're saying
Reiteration.
about 7.
Right.
It's a reiteration. of-
Oh, you're right. Two-thirds of all members of the regional school district committee.
Isn't 5 out of 7.
Yes, but so we need 5. So you need to know if there are people here willing to change their vote, given the fact that it has changed. If not, we will need to readdress this when we meet next. But I will make a motion that we vote to approve or reinforce our approval.
I think it's just simply that you're re-voting your adoption of the FY 25.
Okay, so I vote to approve the adoption of the FY 25 budget as it was presented and as it was brought forth to the town meeting.
Second.
Clarification. We actually did not approve the presented budget, so we can't phrase it that
You're
way.
re-voting to approve the adopted, but the FY 25 adopted budget.
Okay, motion to approve the FY 25 adopted budget. Second. Any discussion?
I voted against our adopted budget in recognition of the fact that the town of Essex is struggling financially. But for the purposes of our vote tonight and getting our budget moving forward, I will support the will of the committee.
I will say something similar in that, part of my concern at that time was causing a brouhaha about pushing towns into a financial situation. Now, knowing that that is not happening, I think it's a relatively easy decision for revote.
It does help to have the town's votes before ours, doesn't it, on this one, because it was overwhelming. Any other discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous for 6, 1 absent. So that is to rest. Thank you. And then finishing on a high note, we have the Manchester-Essex Teachers Association Unit B. Oh, I will end on a higher note. Unit B contract. I will entertain a motion to approve the Manchester-Essex.
So moved. I will make that motion.
Would you like to say it all?
I make a motion to approve the META Unit B contract. Knew that word.
Is there a second? Seconds, any discussion? My discussion is awesome job and thank you. I mean, for support.
Thank you to everybody.
Everybody, including the meeting unit.
Yeah, a nice discussion about it this afternoon internally, and everyone's thrilled.
Good, awesome. Okay. All in favor? That is unanimous. Good job, everyone. And I have been slipped a note. The feasibility study has had 478 votes for and 214 against. So does that get our 2/3? That gets our 2/3. It has passed in Manchester. That is, vote somebody passes or 78 to 4.
Us at that vote, it was not 2/3. 50%.
Oh, it was. Oh, okay.
Technology. It's 2/3 to get it there, and it's.
Simple majority in the ballot. Oh, wonderful. Well, that's much better. Well, that is wonderful news to end the meeting on.
I don't get to do my report. You can do it in 4 minutes. And it
No,
ties
but
to
can
that.
you do it in 2.5?
I can try. And we can take this up at a later date. So I'm going to jump in. I have, obviously, we're ongoing, hiring is ongoing. It's going great. Band directors posted. We'll hopefully get that taken care of in the next couple of weeks. Senior week graduation. Senior week starts with prom tomorrow night. Culminates with graduation next week. And then please join us for the Memorial Day ceremonies. They're really wonderful. They're some of my favorite activities of the year. What I wanted to do is a really quick update on the elementary building project. And I didn't turn this one over yet because I was superstitious, but I was very positive. So I was very optimistic, but didn't want to jinx it. Reminder, we're in the eligibility period, and this is going to speak to everyone's concerns about what are we going to study? When are we going to study it? And how are we going to know? And the answer is we really aren't going to know for almost over a year. So we have to, the answer isn't coming anytime soon. The following elements we've already passed through. So we're in eligibility, we will be in eligibility until November of next year, of the fall, November of 24. We've been approved to be in. We're going to add, we've been approved, I'm sorry, the SBC has been approved. We're going to add a faculty representative in the fall of 24. I've already started talking to Kim about how we'll solicit for that. But we won't even start meeting until November likely. So the SBC is seating one and having a group active and ready to go for the next stage is part of eligibility, but their work doesn't start yet. So it's done, it's checked, it's been submitted, it's been approved, and now it's on hold until we finish the next steps in eligibility. And I'll show you what we're working on in just a second. As of tonight, we've also done our other big piece, which is getting the appropriation for the feasibility study. So that box can be checked. So just a really quick check-in on where we are in the process and where we think we're going to get questions. So this is the standard MSBA flow chart. Remember, we're here in eligibility and we have a long way to go. Before we even get to feasibility, we have to go through forming the project. So some of the questions that we're asking, again, we're not going to tackle them for almost a year in reality. So I don't know if you're going to see this, I can share it in a bigger format for people. What I'm trying to show you here is where we are and where we're going. So some good news. These are the boxes that have checked, and as of tonight, local authorization of funding's checked. So I would grade that out. This is the segment we're working on right now. So in eligibility, there's a lot of paperwork and filings with MSBA. So Michelle and I are working on, I'm working with Kim and Sheila and Heather on the educational profile questionnaire. We're working on the enrollment projections, which really in sum are the DESI numbers on our enrollment for the past 10 years. And they're just asking us to ensure that they jive with our numbers. So we're going through that right now, and we're putting together our maintenance and capital planning information. Enrollment projection, the enrollment questionnaire also is asking for things like housing starts in each of the towns, what is the history of building permits. So they're trying to create a picture of what does it say, where have we been, what are the demographics and projections say we're going to do with birth rate, but then what's going on in the general atmosphere. So things like the 40B projects get logged in terms of potential housing growth opportunities. Once these three things are done, they're going to schedule an enrollment meeting for us. So this could happen as early as the end of June or as late as August. They're going to try to move us up as soon as possible based on our last conversation. I can't guarantee it, so I'm calling it tentative. At that meeting, they're going to start to talk about what our design enrollment might be based on these factors. It's a number that they come up with. They're going to hold on to that, and it's going to inform this activity down here. They're going to certify it. They're going to tell us what to use. It will become a document we can share. But we're not really going to do much with it until we get into preliminary design. That's when you're going to look at your existing conditions, your site development, a really built out educational program that includes visioning sessions. And then they're going to develop alternatives and final. This is when you start to put it all together. What we can do here, you can't see my little asterisk, in the educational profile questionnaire, there's a question that asks us to consider whether we want to consider consolidation or reconfiguration. So we will note, yes, we would like to consider that. So they will have that plus the data to consider whether or not they want us to broaden the scope, whether they'll get on board with broadening the scope. That's all I know. I can't guarantee where it's going to go or what the timeline is going to be. I know the public discussions about all of it will be taking place down here. So that's somewhere in fall of 25. That's what I know today.
This is very quick. It's going to take 2 seconds. Is the enrollment meeting a meeting with the building committee, the school committee, the administration? Who is that with?
It's with us. They just
Who is that?
Zoom in and they usually lots of with hobbies.
Okay, that's, I could tell if you're saying us.
And they just say, and it's not even about It's like this, these enrollment numbers look right to you. This is what would be found from DESI. This is what you submitted under your students out. We have a question here. So it's kind of a fact finding. And then they're going to give you a general sense of what they're going to tell you your design number is. The design number is what they'll then start to use based on my recollection from the past for estimates of the square footage we would need. So it's all going to get discussed. It's just going to take probably a longer time than we needed, than we want to for us to get there.
I think at the last meeting, we suggested that we were going to have a meeting to discuss the enrollment results. And I don't take any position whether we should or not, but it doesn't sound like that's what you're saying. So maybe we should just
hope
be clear
that
about that.
If we have a meeting with them by the end of, I don't know when they issue, I don't recall if they issue the report immediately or they take a meeting with us and then issue a report to us. When we have the report, we'll bring it and share it with you so everyone knows what it is. I just don't know if it will be actionable for us at the time, other than to say, this is what it looks like going forward.
As I've shared this with Pam, I think that part of the concern that we all have and why she's sharing this in more detail also is nobody wants to miss an opportunity. No, we just don't want a deadline to have passed whereby, well, no, if we were going to discuss a thing like consolidation or shifting a couple grades, or whatever those things are that people have ideas about, that, well, no, we needed to do that before this thing. We just want to make sure that nobody misses those spots. So that's really the only concern here.
And I guess as we go to fill out the paperwork,
Yeah.
I'm very clear,
As long as
if
you're.
you want to give me even greater direction, I will alert them that,
Yeah.
and I've already written that we are open to, and I did it in terms of saying, originally, this was the plan. As factors have changed, this has come up in conversation, and we are open to considering consolidations and configurations. So that should signal to them a look at the enrollment in that light.
Anna, you got a question?
And I missed the last meeting, so maybe you guys already went over this. But I just want a clarification that, so we won't even get to the options piece, I think, 2026-ish.
And
Am I wrong?
fall of 25, I mean, this could all shift by a few months, but we have to, every time we finish a segment of deliverables, we have to get voted to the next step. So right now, they're going to tell us to be cautious, follow the steps, and get voted into feasibility. I think the good news on this, and why I've come to really like the MSBA process, is we're not going to have any of these conversations where we have wants and needs at the local level without having our professional team in place to help conduct them. So we'll have objective professional people who know how to interpret, project, and lead the not that we can't lead the conversation, but lead the conversation objectively to help us get to a set of potential outcomes.
So what changed the past? I think just a few weeks ago that you mentioned you talked to MSBA and they said to you that the option won't be part of it, but now it is. So what changed?
We did cover that in the last meeting, so
I don't mind giving the 10-minute.
Please don't give it 10
minutes. Because I think it is
we're well past.
So both things are true. We've been approved, the statement of interest for going forward was for Essex Elementary and the students of Essex Elementary. New things are coming to light and we can signal that to them, but there's no guarantee that it's going to change. So we're kind of in a waiting pattern. It's absolutely true that the people that we spoke to on the phone who are our general liaisons gave their the response that they were supposed to give. You've been approved for Essex Elementary. We kind of went through and talked to some additional people. And they said, well, nobody is going to commit to anything. This is what you applied for. But there's a couple of junctures where you can indicate that you'd like to take a look at, you're open to looking at other things. And they can make an assessment as to whether or not the facts and their ability to support are going to allow us to pass to the next level with that in mind. You spent a lot of time. Does that sound?
I think that was well summarized in less than 3 minutes.
It's all right. Sometimes when I try to go too fast, though, I miss things. So
I understand. Fortunately, our last meeting is recorded, so if you do want to see it, jump on.
that's all I've got.
Thank you. Hate to rush your
That's okay.
report,
I know this
especially
is
when there's so much great stuff, but it is, and this in particular is on people's minds. Okay, school committee comment? Closing school committee comments. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, moves, is there a second? Jake seconds, any discussion? No, all in favor? It is unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:08 PM. Thank you all.
Yeah.
You need that.